right, all you badasses, it's time for GUNSIN701.com's Badass of the Week once again this week. And this week, we're going back in time to around 1912 as we talk about Charles Joffin. Now, Charles Joffin was born in Patton Street next to Westfloat in Birkenhead, England. That was on the 3rd of August, 1878. Now, he first went to sea at age 11 in 1889 and later became a chief baker on various White Star Line steamships, notably the RMS Olympic, Titanic's sister ship. Now, on the 17th of November, 1906, in Liverpool, England, he married Louise Woodward, a native of Douglas on the Isle of Man. They had a daughter, Agnes Lillian, and a son, Roland Ernest. Neither would survive the decade. Now, Joffin was a part of the Victualling crew. Now, Victuallers is traditionally a person who supplies food, beverages, and other provisions for the crews of a vessel at sea. Now, he was on board the Titanic during the delivery of the ship from Belfast, where it was made, to Southampton. He signed on again in Southampton on April 4th of 1912. That was in the capacity of chief baker, and Joffin received a monthly wage of £12, which is equivalent to about £1,580 today, or translating into American money, $1,979.11 a month. Now, when the Titanic hit an iceberg on the evening of the 14th of April at about 23:40, or as we normally say it, at about 11:40 p.m., Joffin was off duty and in his bunk. And according to his testimony, he felt the shock of the collision. Now, word was being passed down from the upper decks that the officers were getting the lifeboats ready for launching, and Joffin set his 13 men who worked for him to the boat docks with provisions for the lifeboats, 4 loaves of bread apiece and about 40 pounds of bread each. Joffin stayed behind for a time, but then followed them, reaching the boat decks around 12:30 a.m. Joffin joined Chief Officer Henry Tingle Wild by Lifeboat 10. Now, Joffin helped with stewards and other seamen, the ladies and children to the lifeboats, although after a while, the women on deck ran away from the boats, saying that they were safer on board the Titanic. They weren't. Now, Chief Baker then went on deck and forcibly brought the women and children back and threw them on the lifeboats. The Titanic's final plunge, Joffin was at the topmost part of the ship at this point. Now, although he was assigned as captain of lifeboat number 10, Joffin did not get aboard. It was already being crewed by 2 sailors and a steward. Now, he went below after the lifeboat 10 had gone and had a drop of liqueur, and some say just a little bit more than a drop. He then came upstairs again, meeting an old friend, the doctor, possibly William O'Laughlin. Now, he arrived at the boat deck, and the boats had been lowered. He went down to the deck promenade and threw about 50 deck chairs overboard so that they could be used as flotation devices. Again, going above and beyond what normal people do. Now, Joffin then went into the deck pantry on the deck to get a drink of water. He heard a loud crash as if part of the ship had buckled. Now, he left the pantry and joined the crowd, running aft toward the poop deck.
Hey, don't laugh. That's what it's called.
And as he was crossing the well deck, the ship suddenly gave list over the port. And according to him, threw everybody in the well in a bunch except for him. Now, Joffin climbed to the starboard side of the poop deck, getting hold of the safety rail so that he was on the outside of the ship when it went down by the head. Now, as the ship finally sank, Joffin rode it down as if he were in an elevator, not getting his head underwater. That was his words. Therefore, making him the last survivor to leave the Titanic. Now, according to his own testimony, Joffin kept paddling and treading water for about 2 hours. He also admitted to hardly feeling the cold, most likely thanks to the alcohol content he had imbibed in. Now, the prevailing thought is that alcohol will not save you from hypothermia, but a certain amount of alcohol can imbue you to be able to take the initial shock of the cold elements. So take that, science. When daylight broke, he spotted the upturned, collapsed B lifeboat with the second officer Charles Lightoller and about 30 men standing on the side of the boat. Jofflin slowly swam toward it, but there was no room for him. However, a cook, Isaac Maynard, recognized him and held his hand as the chief baker held onto the side of the boat with his feet and legs still in the water. Another lifeboat then appeared and Jofflin swam to it and was taken in, where he stayed until he boarded the RMS Carpathia that had come to the rescue. He was rescued from sea with only swollen feet. I'd say that's quite lucky. After surviving the Titanic disaster, Jofflin returned to England, where he was one of the crew members who reported to testify at the British Wreck Commission's inquiry into the sinking of the Titanic, headed by Lord Mersey. That was in 1920. Jofflin moved permanently to the United States in Paterson, New Jersey. He also served on the ship operated by the American Export Lines, as well as on a World War II troop transport before retiring in 1944. Now, after moving back to New Jersey, he remarried to Miss Anne Eleanor Ripley Howarth Cole. That's a heck of a name. A native of Leeds who had first come to the United States in 1888. Now, Annie's death in 1943 was a great loss from which he never recovered. And 12 years later, Jofflin was invited to describe his experiences in the chapter of Walter Lord's book, A Night to Remember, which was also made into a fantastic movie. I think a little better sometimes than the Titanic movie. If you don't believe me, we can fight about it. Now, soon afterwards, his health rapidly declined. He died in Patterson Hospital in New Jersey on December 9th, 1956, at the age of 78. And he was buried alongside with his wife at Cedar Lawn Cemetery in Patterson, New Jersey. Now, he was just a chef and a baker, but that's not all he was. He went above and beyond to try to save other people's lives. He was constantly thinking about the passengers and his fellow crewmen, and for that reason, I'm calling it. Charles Jofflin was a true badass. Once again, we thank everybody for tuning in for our Badass of the Week here on GunsInThe701.com. Hey, you see the little QR code up in the corner? That is a cool little thing that you can, scan, click on, do whatever you got to do to get there. And go to GunsInThe701.com. Either buy some of our merch. That would be cool. We would like that. We've got some cool stuff. Also, if you want, you could just throw us a little cash. A couple bucks here and there, whatever you feel like and whatever you can spare. It helps us continue the show here, continue our podcast, and also keep our equipment up to date because Lord knows, stuff ain't cheap nowadays. We appreciate all your help and appreciate everybody who's been following our Badass of the Week on GunsInThe701.com. And remember, if you've got a story for GunsInThe701.com's Badass of the Week, well, I got an idea for you. Just drop us a line at GunsInThe701.com. That's our email. And tell us what badass you'd like us to talk about. We'd love to hear from you. And until next week, when we uncover another badass of history, I'm Mike. And as my buddy Clay always says, keep your powder dry. Everybody, for GunsInThe701.com, this is Mike, and once again, we're talking about the badasses of the world that you might not have known about. But I'll tell you what, these guys and gals were truly that, badasses. Leo Major, born January 23rd, 1921 in New Bedford, Massachusetts, to French-Canadian parents. He moved his family to Montreal before his first birthday. Leo Major joined the Canadian Army in 1940 to prove to his father that he was somebody to be proud of. Spoiler alert! Major was serving with the Regiment de la Chandelière, which landed in Juno Beach in the invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944. During the reconnaissance mission on D-Day, Major captured a German half-track by himself, because he had nothing better to do, I guess, so. The vehicle contained German communication equipment and secret codes. Days later, during his first encounter with an SS Nazi patrol, he killed 4 soldiers. However, one of them managed to ignite a phosphorus grenade. In the resulting explosion, Major lost an eye, but continued to fight. He continued his service as a scout and a sniper by insisting that he only needed one eye to sight his weapon. And according to him, he looked good as a pirate. That's not me, that's him. During the Battle of Scheldt in Zeeland in the southern Netherlands, Major and his friend Corporal Wilfred Arsenal were assigned to determine the fates of a company of recruits that had disappeared after being sent to capture a town. However, as Arsenal fell ill, Major went alone. Didn't tell anybody, just went. After finding the company's abandoned equipment and determining that they had been captured, Major entered a house to find shelter from the rain and the cold, and that's when he spotted 2 German soldiers walking along a dike. He captured the first German, used him as bait to capture the other one, and brought his captives not back to his base, no, he brought them to their commanding officer's base. The officer and his company, totaling around 100 men, surrendered. In a nearby group of houses, SS troops, witnessing the company surrendering, opened fire on them, killing 7 and injuring some others. Now, Major disregarded the enemy fire and continued escorting his prisoners to the Canadian front lines, ordering a passing Canadian tank to fire on the SS troops behind him. He marched back to camp with the surviving 93 prisoners. 93. You got to think about it. What did you do today? I mean, that's just a day for this guy. Now, in February 1945, Major was helping a military chaplain load corpses from a destroyed Tiger II tank into a universal carrier in Kempelen, Germany. After they finished, the chaplain and the driver seated themselves in the front, while Major jumped in the back of the vehicle. That's when the carrier struck a landmine, resulting explosion killing the chaplain and the driver and knocking Major unconscious, also sending him into the air about 30 feet. Upon regaining consciousness, he awoke to find 2 concerned medical officers trying to assess his condition. They transported him on a truck to a field hospital 30 miles away, stopping every 15 minutes to inject him with morphine to relieve the pain in his back, which later we would find out was broken. Now his commander says, "You're done. You get to go home." So Major did what anyone else would do. He went AWOL. He escaped from the hospital, ran back to his own platoon, and took up his normal job of killing Nazis. How he wasn't arrested for AWOL, I don't know, but then again, yeah, it was a different time. At the beginning of April 1945, the Regiment de la Château, I said that wrong, but that's all right, those guys were approaching the city of Zwolle, which had shown to have a strong German resistance. Now, on April 13, the regiment commanding officer asked for 2 volunteers for a reconnaissance mission into Zwolle, their task being to scout the German forces and, if possible, make contact with the Dutch resistance. This before an Allied artillery barrage could commence. Now, Private Major and Corporal Arsenal, they stepped forward and accepted the task. However, Major and Arsenal, wanting to spare the city from destruction, decided to keep to themselves that they were going to liberate the city by themselves. That night, Major and Arsenal entered the farmhouse of Hendrik van Gernen, who gave them rough positions of German encampments near the railway tracks. After leaving the farmhouse, Arsenal was killed by German fire after accidentally giving away the pair's position. Now, Major killed 2 of the Germans, but the rest fled in a vehicle. Now, deciding to continue his mission alone, Major entered the Zwolle near Sassenpoort. Now, he was carrying 2 Sten guns and a big sack of grenades. Yeah, something about being prepared, right? Now, he arrived in the center of Zwolle about 100 hours and found the streets silent and deserted. Then, he spotted a German machine gun nest, which the crew was sleeping. He promptly attacked and eliminated them. He then found the German scout car and forced one of the Germans, who he had captured, to drive through the streets with the lights on, flying a white flag. And for several hours, Major moved through the streets in this manner, shooting at any target he could find, making an impression that a large Canadian force had arrived. Now, by a stroke of luck, Private Major came across the head of local resistance Fritz Kuiper and 3 of his men. By now, the Germans appeared to have fled the city in panic. The group, therefore, returned to the town hall, and the resistance fighters brought the citizens out into the streets. The local radio station was used to announce that the town had been liberated. Now, Major was exhausted, but he had to complete his mission by bringing back the body of his comrade Wilfred Arsenal. The resistance fighters arranged for a car to transport the body back to the Canadian lines to report the results of his mission to his commanding officer, who was probably slightly surprised that the town was taken by 1 man. Now, after the conclusion of World War II, Major returned to his former job as a good old pipe fitter. That's right, that's all he did. He made pipes. Yes, what does a pipe fitter do? He also took the time to have an operation to fix his back, which had bothered him since the landmine explosion back in February of 1945. You think? Now, then, the Korean War broke out.
The Canadian government raised a force to join the United Nations command in repelling the communist invasion.
Seems like it should be said that way, right? Major was called back and ended up in the Scout and Sniper Platoon of the 2nd Battalion Royal 22 Regiment of the 25th Canadian Infantry Brigade. Now, Major fought in the First Battle of Mariang-San. Hill 355, nicknamed Little Gibraltar, was a strategic feature, commanding the terrain for 20 miles around. So the communists were determined to take it before the truce talks came to an agreement that would lock each side into their present positions. Now, Hill 355 was held by the 3rd U.S. Infantry Division, who linked up with Canadians on the Americans' western flank. Now, on November 22nd, the Chinese 64th Army, about 40,000 men, began their attack. Over the course of about 2 days, the Americans were pushed back from Hill 355 by elements of the Chinese 190th and 191st Divisions. Now, the 3rd U.S. Infantry Division tried to recapture the hill, but without any success. And the Chinese had moved into the nearby Hill 227, practically surrounding the Canadian forces. Now, to relieve pressure, an elite scout and sniper team led by, you guessed it, Leo Major, was brought up armed with Sten guns, because you go with what you know. Major and his 18 men, wearing running shoes so they could be silent in their movements, passed through enemy lines and crept up Hill 227 from the Chinese side. Now, at a signal, Major's men opened fire, panicking the Chinese, who were trying to understand why the enemy's fire was coming from the center of their troops instead of the outside. That's kind of confusing, but hey, it worked, right? By 12:45 a.m., Major's team had retaken the hill. However, about an hour later, the 190th and the 191st, totaling around 14,000 men, launched a counterattack. Major was ordered to retreat, but refused because that's the kind of guy he was. He found a scant cover for his men, and they held the enemy off throughout the night. At times, they were so close to Major's position that his own mortar bombs were practically falling on top of him. Major and his platoon held Hill 227 for 3 days until relieved by the U.S. 3rd Infantry Division. Ladies and gentlemen, that guy is a badass. Leo Major died in October 12th of 2008 and was buried at the Last Post Fund National Field of Honor in Pointe Claire, Quebec. He's survived by Pauline Delacroix, his wife of 57 years, 4 children and 5 grandchildren, and to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the victory in Europe, Canadian Post issued a stamp in honor of Leo Major. That stamp, called the One-Eyed Ghost, came out April 29th, 2020. And ladies and gentlemen, I don't need to say it, but I will because it's the name of the show. Leo Sayer is definitely 100% a badass. Remember, support GunsInThe701.com with our shows, including 701 Nation and more. Make sure you check them out at our website and on all your social media platforms. And if you get a chance to go to our website and maybe pick up some cool t-shirts or merch, or even check out, of course, how you can just donate to us through the barcode, we'd love that because, you know, podcasting ain't as cheap as everybody says it is. GunsInThe701.com. I'm Mike Kelly. Lauer Auto Repair, located at 309 South Washington Street in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Give them a call at 701-258-6308.
The team of mechanics at Lauer Auto can take care of any problem your vehicle is having. And when you do business with Lauer, you can be assured you're doing business with a pro Second Amendment America First repair shop. There are plenty of other auto repair shops in the Bismarck-Mandan area. But why take a chance at patronizing a shop that might not have your beliefs at heart? Make no mistake. Lauer Auto is your pro Second Amendment repair shop. When you talk to the guys at Lauer Auto, don't forget to tell them that you heard they are a sponsor of Guns and the 701 and that you appreciate their support of our pro Second Amendment, pro North Dakota live stream and podcast. That's Lauer Auto Repair, 701-258-6308.
701-258-6308.
Located 309 South Washington Street in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Experience the exhilaration of power in your hands at Bloodline Kinetics. Why Cerakote? Simply, it aids in firearm preservation while also giving your piece a unique look. Barrel threading, NFA laser engraving, bolt handle threading, mount, level, and bore, sight scope chamber, rebarreling, and much more. Bloodline Kinetics is meant to reflect a long American lineage in gun ownership, who stand for the Second Amendment rights, Bloodline, and the science behind gun accuracy. Kinetics. To some, it's just a constitutional right that can go away. To us, it's in our American bloodline, and we believe it should stay that way. Here at Bloodline Kinetics, we understand that hunters, sportsmen, women, and gun owners should have a quality firearm. Stop and see us at 2008 Morrison Avenue 2 in Bismarck, North Dakota, 58504, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Call 701-390-7997. Visit our website, bloodlinekinetics.com.
Ever tried catching a fish with your bare hands or hunting a deer with a stick? Don't be that guy. At Mandan Sporting Goods, we've got all the hunting and camping gear you need. We're your one-stop shop for outdoor adventure.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Check us out at mandansportinggoods.com, or better yet, stop in to 210 East Main Street, Mandan, North Dakota. Mandan Sporting Goods, where the outdoors meets functionality. Store hours, Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Closed Sunday. Take up arms at Mandan Sporting Goods. Your adventure starts here.
Looking for the best gun gear for every and any situation? Little Angry Man Arms LLC has you covered. Top-notch guns from top-name brands like Winchester, Glock, Sig Sauer, and Ruger, to essential extras from Magpul, Streamlight, Hollow, Sun Optics, and more. Little Angry Man Arms LLC have everything to make your shooting adventures a success. Visit littleangrymanarms.com today and gear up for your next big hunt, competition, or home defense. Don't miss out on our exclusive deals. Little Angry Man Arms LLC, based in Trail City, South Dakota, your ultimate hunting partner.
Anvil Brand LLC, raising and training tomorrow's barrel horses right out of Bismarck, North Dakota. Tracy and her family are great American patriots who not only support the Second Amendment, but they also promoted what you're looking for: top quality barrel horses. Go ahead and give Tracy a call at 701-471-6629 and tell them Guns and 701.com sent you. That's Anvil Brand LLC out of Bismarck, North Dakota.
Like Michael, the flow like Aubrey. Walk around thinking I'm a prince like Saudi. Mismatched Converse, t-shirts tucked in. Know my worth, can't tell me nothing. White Nikes, albino, can cop my stilo. Head to the top, bottom line is a model.
What's up, badasses? That's right, it's Guns and the 701.com's weekly Badass of the Week. And this week, we go back just a little bit before World War II, and we talk about, well, Charles Elwood Yeager, born February 13th, 1923, raised in Hamlin, West Virginia. Now, Yeager had two brothers, Roy and Hal Jr., and two sisters, Doris Ann, who was accidentally killed at age 1, and Pansy Lee. His cousin Steve Yeager happened to be a professional baseball catcher, just in case you're looking for trivia. He attended Hamlin High School, where he played basketball and football, receiving his best grades in geometry and typing. Yeager enlisted as a private in the U.S. Army Air Force on September 12, 1941, and became an aircraft mechanic at George Air Force Base in Victorville, California. Now, at enlistment, Yeager was not eligible for flight training because of his age and educational background. But with the entry of the U.S. into World War II less than 3 months later at Pearl Harbor, that prompted the United States Air Force to alter its recruiting standards. Yeager had unusually sharp vision, his visual acuity rated at 20/10, which once enabled him to shoot a deer at 600 yards with iron sights. At the time of his flight training acceptance, he was a crew chief on an AT-11. He received his pilot wings and a promotion to flight officer at Luke Field, Arizona, where he graduated from Class 43C on March 10, 1943. He was then assigned to the 357th Fighting Group at Tonopah, Nevada. He initially trained as a fighter pilot, flying a Bell P-39 Ares Cobras, and then being grounded for 7 days for clipping a farmer's trees during a training flight. Then he shipped overseas with the group on November 23, 1943. Stationed in the United Kingdom at RF Leiston, Yeager flew P-51 Mustangs in combat with the 363rd Fighter Squadron. He named his aircraft Glamorous Glen after his girlfriend, Glennis Faye Dickhouse, who would later become his wife in February of 1945. Yeager gained one victory before he was shot down over France in his first aircraft on March 5, 1944, on his 8th mission. Now, he escaped to Spain on March 30th, 1944, with the help of the Marquise, the French resistance, and returned to England on May 15th, 1944. During his stay with the Marquise, Yeager assisted the guerrillas in duties that did not involve direct combat, but he did help construct bombs for the group, a skill that he had learned from his father. And I found no other information on that other than I want to know more. I wish my dad taught me how to build bombs. He was awarded a Bronze Star for helping a navigator, Omar M. Pat Patterson, Jr., to cross the Pyrenees, despite a regulation prohibiting evaders or escaped pilots for flying over enemy territory again, the purpose of which was to prevent resistance groups from being compromised by giving the enemy a second chance to possibly capture them. Now, Yeager was reinstated to fly combat. He had joined another evader, fellow P-51 pilot First Lieutenant Fred Glover, in speaking directly to Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower on June 12, 1944. In a quote, "I raised so much hell that General Eisenhower finally let me go back to my squadron." That's my Yeager impersonation. He was cleared for combat after D-Day because all the free Frenchmen, the Marquise and people like that, had surfaced and told all the stories about what Yeager had done to help them. Now, Eisenhower, after gaining permission from the War Department, decided to request that Yeager and Glover be reinstated and be able to fly, combat anywhere. In the meantime, Yeager shot down his second enemy aircraft, a German Junker 88 bomber over the English Channel. Now, the P-51D 20NA, otherwise known as Glamorous Glen 3, is the aircraft in which Yeager achieved most of his aerial victories. Now, Yeager demonstrated outstanding flying skills and combat leadership. On October 12, 1944, he became the first pilot in his group to make ace in a day. That means downing 5 enemy aircraft in a single mission. Now, the fun part on that, 2 of these victories were scored without firing a single shot. He was running low on ammo. He flew into a firing position against a Messerschmitt Bf-109. The pilot of the aircraft, the German, broke to the port and ended up colliding with his wingman. Now, Yeager said both pilots bailed out. He finished the war with 11.5 official victories, including one of his first air-to-air victories over a jet fighter, the German Messerschmitt Me-262 that he shot down as it was on final approach for landing. Yeager was commissioned second lieutenant while at Leiston and promoted to captain before the end of his tour. He flew his 61st and final mission on January 15, 1945, and returned to the United States early February 1945. Now, as an invader, he received his choice of assignments. And because his new wife was pregnant, he chose Wright Field near his home in West Virginia. Now, his high number of flight hours and maintenance experience qualified him to become a functioning test pilot of repaired aircraft, which brought him under the command of Colonel Albert Boyd, head of the Aeronautical Systems Flight Test Division and a test pilot himself. Now, this is where it gets fun and it gets fast pretty darn quick. Yeager remained in the U.S. Army Air Force after the war, becoming a test pilot at Marick Army Airfield, now Edwards Air Force Base, following graduation from the Air Material Command's Flight Performance School. Now, after Bell Aircraft's test pilot Chalmers Slick Goodwin, he demanded $150,000 to break the sound barrier. Says he's not going up unless they paid him. Now, equivalent today, that would be worth about $2.5 million. needless to say, they weren't going to do that. So the U.S. Air Force selected 24-year-old Yeager to fly the rocket-powered Bell XS-1 in the NACA program to research high-speed flight. Now, as Yeager was getting ready to fly the Bell X-1, 2 nights before the scheduled flight date, Yeager broke 2 ribs when he fell from a horse. Now, he worried that the injury would remove him from the mission and reported that he went to a civilian doctor in nearby Rosemond who taped up his ribs. Now, besides his wife, who was riding with him, Yeager told only his friend and fellow project pilot, Jack Ridley, about the accident. On the day of the flight, Yeager was in such pain that he could not seal the X-1's hatch by himself, but thinking ahead of time, Ridley had rigged up a device using the end of a broom handle as an extra lever to allow Yeager to seal the hatch. Now, Yeager broke the sound barrier on October 14, 1947, in level flight while piloting the X-1 Glamorous Glennis at Mach 1.05 at an altitude of 45,000 feet over the Rogers Dry Lake over the Mojave Desert in California. Now, the success of the mission wasn't announced to the public for nearly 8 months until June 10, 1948. Yeager was awarded the Mackey Trophy and the Collier Trophy in 1948 for his Mach transcending flight, and the Harmon International Trophy in 1954. The X-1 he flew that day was later on permanent display at the Smithsonian Institute's National Air and Space Museum. Now, during 1952, he attended the Air Command and Staff College. Now, Yeager continued to break many speed and altitude records. He was one of the first American pilots to fly a Mikovan Gurevich MiG-15 after its pilot Nonkum Suk defected to South Korea. Now, returning to Marek Air Force Base during the later half of 1953, Yeager was involved in the United States Air Force team that was working on the X-1A, an aircraft designed to surpass Mach 2 in level flight. Now, that year, he flew a chase aircraft for the civilian pilot Jackie Cochran, as she became the first woman to fly faster than sound. On November 20th, 1953, the U.S. Navy program involving the D-558-2 Skyrocket and its pilot Scott Crossfield, as they became the first team to reach twice the speed of sound. After they were bested, Ridley and Yeager decided to beat the rivals' Crossfield speed record in a series of test flights that would be dubbed Operation NACA WEEP. I have no idea why and can't find out why. Anyway, not only did they beat Crossfield by setting a new record at Mach 2.44 on December 12, 1953, but they did it in time to spoil a celebration planned for the 50th anniversary of flight, in which Crossfield was to be called the fastest man alive. Not anymore. Now, the new record flight, however, did not entirely go as planned. Now, since shortly after reaching Mach 2.44, Yeager lost control of the X-1A at about 80,000 feet. Think about that for a second. Now, due to the inertia coupling, a phenomenon largely unknown at the time, with the aircraft simultaneously rolling, pitching, and yawing out of control, Yeager dropped 51,000 feet in less than a minute before regaining control at about 29,000 feet. He then managed to land without further incident. For this feat, Yeager was awarded the Distinguished Service Medal in 1954. Moving on a few years, Yeager was the commandant of the United States Air Force Aerospace Research Pilot School with a model of the North American X-15 in 1959. Yeager was foremost a fighter pilot and held several squadrons and wing commands. Now, from 1954 to 57, he commanded an F-86H Sabre equipped with the 417th Fighter Bomber Squadron. They were out of Hahn Air Force Base in West Germany. And from 1957 to 1960, the F-100D Super Sabre equipped with the 1st Fighter Day Squadron at George Air Force Base, California, and Morón Air Force Base in Spain. Now, he was a full colonel in 1962 after completion of a year of studies and a final thesis on STOL aircraft. Those are those cool planes that basically can come to a dead standstill and drop where they are. So it's kind of cool. See him a lot up in Canada. Now, he became the first commandant of the U.S. Air Force Aerospace Research Pilot School, which introduced astronauts for NASA and the United States Air Force after its redesignation from the United States Air Force Flight Test Pilot School. Now, he had only high school education, so he was not eligible to become an astronaut like those he trained. In April of 1962, Yeager made his only flight with Neil Armstrong. Now, their job, flying a T-33, was to evaluate Smith Ranch Dry Lake in Nevada for use as an emergency landing site for the North American X-15. It was in his autobiography that he wrote that he knew the lake bed was unsuitable for landing after recent rains, but Armstrong insisted on flying out anyway. As Armstrong suggested that they do a touch and go, Yeager advised against it, telling him, "You may touch, but you ain't gonna go." And when Armstrong did touch down, the wheels became stuck in the mud, bringing the plane to a sudden stop and provoking Yeager to fits of laughter. They had to wait for a rescue. See? He told you so. All right, I'm adding this in here because you shouldn't, even with your heroes, downplay their bad sides. This is one of Yeager's bad sides, and it should be in the record. Yeager's participation in the test pilot training program for NASA included controversial behavior. Yeager reportedly did not believe that Ed Dwight, the first African-American pilot admitted to the space program, should be part of it. In a 2019 documentary series, Chasing the Moon, the filmmakers made the claim that Yeager instructed staff and participants at the school that Washington was trying to cram that down our throats. In his words, President Kennedy is using this to make the racial equality a subject, so he advised everyone not to speak to Dwight, not to socialize with Dwight, don't drink with Dwight, don't invite him over to your house, and in 6 months he'll be gone. In his autobiography, Dwight detailed how Yeager's leadership led to the discrimination treatment throughout his training at Edwards Air Force Base. All right, back to the story. Between December 63 and January 64, Yeager completed 5 flights in the NASA M2 F1 lifting body. And now, an accident during the December 63 test flight in one of the school's NF-104s resulted in serious injuries. I mean, look at that thing. After climbing into a near-record altitude, the plane's controls became ineffective and entered into a flat spin after several turns and altitude loss of approximately 95,000 feet. Think about that. You fell 95,000 feet. Yeah. Anyway, Yeager ejected from the plane, and during the ejection, the seat straps released normally, but the seat base slammed into Yeager with still hot rocket motors, breaking his helmet's plastic faceplate, causing an emergency oxygen supply to catch fire. Now, the resulting burns on his face required extensive and agonizing medical care. This was Yeager's last attempt at setting test flying records. So you would think normally that would be the end of the story, right? Well, no, there's still more. In 1966, Yeager took command of the 405th Tactical Fighter Wing at Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. Now, those squadrons were deployed on a rotationary temporary duty in South Vietnam and elsewhere in Southeast Asia. Now, there, he flew 127 more missions. In February 1968, Yeager was assigned to command of the 4th Tactical Fighter Wing at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, North Carolina, and led the McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II Wing in South Korea during the Pueblo Crisis. Now, Yeager was promoted to Brigadier General and was assigned in July of 1969 as Vice Commander of the 17th Air Force. From 1971 to 73, on the behest of Ambassador Joseph Farland, Yeager was assigned to the Air Attaché in Pakistan to advise the Pakistani Air Force, which was led by Abdur Rahim Khan, the first Pakistani to break the sound barrier. Now, he arrived in Pakistan at a time when tensions with India were at their highest levels. One of Yeager's jobs during this time was to assist the Pakistani technicals in installing the AIM-9 Sidewinders on the PAF Shenyang F-6 fighters. He also had a keen interest in interacting with the Pakistani Air Force personnel from various Pakistani squadrons and helping them develop combat tactics. In one instance, in 1972, while visiting the number 15 Squadron Cobras at Peshawar Air Base, the squadron's OC Wing Commander, Najib Khan, escorted him to K2 in a pair of F-86Fs after Yeager requested to visit the second highest mountain on Earth. Now, after hostilities did break out in 71, he decided to stay in West Pakistan and continued overseeing Pakistani Air Force's operations. Now, Yeager recalled the Pakistanians in a quote. I gotta use his voice, don't I? The Pakistanians whipped the Indians' asses in the sky. The Pakistanians scored a 3-to-1 kill ratio, knocking out 102 Russian-made Indian jets and losing only 34 airplanes of their own. Now, during the war, he flew around the Western Front in a helicopter, documenting the wreckage of Indian aircrafts of Soviet origin, which included the Sukhoi Su-7 and the MiG-21s. Now, these aircrafts were transported to the United States after the war for analysis, because that's what we do. It was the Cold War after all. Now, Yeager flew around in his Beechcraft Queen Air, a small passenger aircraft that was assigned to him by the Pentagon that he used to pick up shot-down Indian fighter pilots. The Beechcraft was later destroyed during an air raid by the Indian Air Force at a Pakistani air base, which Yeager was not present at the time. Now, Edward C. Ingram, a U.S. diplomat who had served as a political counselor to the Ambassador Farland in Islamabad, recalled the incident in the Washington Monthly on October of 1985. And I quote, "After Yeager's Beechcraft was destroyed during the Indian air raid, he raged to his cowering colleagues that the Indian pilots had been specifically instructed by Indira Gandhi to blast his plane personally. It was," later he wrote, "the Indian way of giving Uncle Sam the middle finger." Yeager was incensed over the incident and demanded U.S. retaliation that never came. Now, on March 1st, 1975, Yeager retired from the Air Force at Norton Air Force Base in California. Yeah, we're supposed to say, yeah, that's it, right? That's the end? Oh my gosh, this is a long story. This guy did a lot. On October 14th, 1997, on the 50th anniversary of the historic flight past Mach 1, he flew the new glamorous Glennis III, an F-15D Eagle, past Mach 1. Now, the chase plane for the flight was an F-16 Fighting Falcon, piloted by Bob Hoover, a longtime test, fighter, and aerobatic pilot who had been Yeager's wingman for the first supersonic flight. Now, at the end of his speech to the crowd in 1997, Yeager concluded, "All I am, I owe to the Air Force." Later that month, he was the recipient of the Tony Jannus Award for his achievements. Award, award, award. Award, award, award. Over the years, more awards. Awards from presidents. Awards from companies. Awards from other places. My goodness. Now in 73, Yeager was inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame, arguably aviation's highest honor. 74, Yeager received the Golden Plate Award from the American Academy of Achievement. December 75, the U.S. Congress awarded Yeager a silver medal, equivalent to a non-combat medal of honor, for contributing immeasurable to the aerospace science by risking his life in piloting the X-1. President Gerald Ford presented medal to Yeager in a ceremony at the White House on December 8, 1976. Yeager never attended college, but was often modest about his background, but is considered by many, including Flying Magazine, the California Hall of Fame, the state of West Virginia, the National Aviation Hall of Fame, and a few U.S. presidents, and the United States Army and Air Force, to be one of the greatest pilots of all time. Yeager lived in Grass Valley, Northern California, and died in the afternoon on December 7th, 2020, at the age of 97 in a Los Angeles hospital. Now, following his death, President Donald Trump issued a statement of condolences, stating that Yeager, quote, was one of the greatest pilots in all history, proud West Virginian and an American original who was relentless in pushing the boundaries of human achievement. Ladies and gentlemen, it may have been long, but it was well worth it. We are talking about the one, the only, Chuck Yeager, true American badass. Hey, once again, we thank everybody for tuning in. GunsInThe701.com and our Badass of the Week. Remember, we try to do this for you every week on our Wednesday show, and we do that at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 7 o'clock Central Time, and on all our social medias. And don't forget also, you can check out all our store stuff that we've got available for you at our website at GunsInThe701.com. You can hit that little barcode thing we got up there. Also, if you want, drop us a little cash. Whatever you want to spare, we can use it to update our equipment, make our studios better, and bring you really, really cool stuff. That's pretty much it for today. We do appreciate you tuning in. And don't forget, we thank you for supporting GunsInThe701.com and 701 Nation. And like my buddy Clay always says, keep your powder dry. Hey everybody, this is Guns in the 701.com's Badass of the Week, and I'm Mike. And as we do every week, we try to give you a little history on some badass out there that you might not have known about. This time, we're talking about Daniel Inouye. Born in 1924 in Honolulu Territory of Hawaii, his father, Hirito Inouye, was a jeweler who had immigrated to Hawaii from Japan as a child. His mother, Kame Inouye, was a homemaker, born on the island of Maui to Japanese immigrants. Now, both of Daniel's parents were Christian and met at the River Street Methodist Church in Honolulu. They were married in 1923. Now, this heritage makes Daniel a Nissi, or second-generation Japanese-American. Inouye grew up in a Bingham tract in a Chinese-American enclave in Honolulu. He was the oldest among 4 children, and as a child, he collected homing pigeons, which hatched from eggs given to him at an army base in Schofield Barracks in return for him cleaning the coops. As a teenager, he worked on the local beaches, teaching tourists how to surf. Inouye's parents raised him and his siblings with a mix of American and Japanese customs. His parents spoke English at home, but had their children attend a private Japanese language school in addition to public school. Inouye dropped out of the Japanese school in 1939 because he disagreed with the instructor's anti-American rhetoric, and then focused his studies at President William McKinley High. Now, he intended to go to college and medical school after his planned 1942 graduation. Then Inouye witnessed the attack of Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. The Japanese surprise attack brought the United States right into World War II. Now, being a volunteer first aid instructor with the Red Cross, Inouye was called on by his supervisors to report to a Red Cross station set up at Lunaleo Elementary School. There, he attended to the civilian injured by anti-aircraft shells that had fallen onto the city. Now, after the United States declared war on Japan the next day, Inouye took up a paid job from his Red Cross supervisor to work there as a medical aide. For the remainder of his senior year, Inouye attended school during the day and worked at the Red Cross station at night. He graduated from McKinley High School in 1942. Now, although Inouye wanted to join the armed forces after graduating, he did not possess the rights as a Japanese American. The United States Department of War had declared that all Japanese Americans were enemy aliens, which stipulated they could not volunteer or be drafted for military service. Inouye then enrolled at the University of Hawaii at Manoa in September of 1942 as a pre-medical student with the goal of becoming a surgeon. In March of 1943, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt established the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, an all-Nissi combat unit. Inouye applied and was initially turned down because his work at the Red Cross was deemed critical, but was inducted later that month. The unit was composed of over 2,500 Nissi from Hawaii and 800 from the mainland. Inouye went with his unit in April to Camp Shelby in Mississippi for a 10-month training period. Now, while in Mississippi, the unit visited the Rohar War Relocation Center in Arkansas, where Inouye witnessed the internment of Japanese Americans firsthand. The 442nd shipped off to Italy in May of 1944 after the conclusion of their training. Shortly before liberation of Rome, Inouye was promoted to sergeant within the first 3 months of fighting in the Italian countryside north of Rome. The 442nd was then sent to eastern France, where they seized the towns of Bruges, Bellemont, and Bifontaine, all from the Germans. In late October, the regiment was transferred to the Vosges mountain regions in France, where they rescued 211 members of the 1st Battalion of the 141st Infantry Regiment, otherwise known as the Lost Battalion. Inouye received a battlefield commission to 2nd lieutenant for his actions, becoming the youngest officer in his regiment. Now, getting into his badassery. During the battle, a shot struck him in the chest directly above his heart, but the bullets were stopped by $2 silver that he happened to have stacked in his shirt pocket. He continued to carry those coins throughout the war in his shirt pocket as good luck charms, but lost them later on. Now, the 442nd spent the next several months near Nice, guarding the French-Italian border until early 1945, when they were called to northern Italy to assist with an assault on the German strongholds in the Apennine Mountains. On April 21, 1945, Inouye was grievously wounded while leading an assault on a heavily defended Colle Mostatolo Ridge near Santorizio, Italy. Now, the ridge served as a strong point of the German fortifications known as the Gothic Line, the last and most unyielding line of German defense works in Italy. Now, during a flanking maneuver against German machine gun nests, Inouye was shot in the stomach from 40 yards away. Ignoring his wound, he proceeded with the attack and, together with the unit, destroyed the first 2 machine gun nests. Now, as his squad distracted the 3rd machine gunner, the injured Inouye crawled slowly towards the final bunker and came within 10 yards. Now, as he prepared to toss a grenade, a German soldier fired a 30mm Schweichenbacher anti-personnel rifle grenade at Inouye, striking him in the right elbow. Now, although it failed to detonate, the blunt force of the grenade, for the most part, amputated most of his right arm, all at the elbow. The nature of his injuries caused his arm muscles to involuntarily squeeze the grenade tightly via a reflex arc, preventing his arm from going limp and dropping the live grenade at his feet. Now, this injury left him disabled, in terrible pain, under fire with minimal cover, and staring at a live grenade clenched in a fist that suddenly did not belong to him anymore. Inouye's platoon moved to his aid, but he shouted at them to keep back out of fear that his severed fist would involuntarily relax and drop the grenade, possibly hurting them. Now, as the Germans inside the bunker began reloading his rifle with regular full metal jacket ammunition to finish off Inouye pried the live hand grenade from his useless right hand with his left, tossing it into the bunker, killing the German. Then, stumbling to his feet, Inouye continued forward, killing at least 1 more German before sustaining his 5th and final wound of the day in his left leg. Inouye fell unconscious, but awoke to see his worried men of his platoon hovering over him. His only comment before being carried away was to gruffly order them to get back to their positions, saying nobody called off this war. By the end of the day, the ridge had fallen to the American control, without the loss of any soldiers in Inouye's platoon. The remainder of Inouye's mutilated right arm was later amputated at a field hospital without proper anesthesia, as he had been given too much morphine at the aid station, and it was feared that any more would lower his blood pressure enough to kill him. The war in Europe ended on May 8th, less than 3 weeks later. Shortly before the Japanese surrendered at the end of World War II in August of 1945, Inouye was shipped back to the United States to recover for 11 months at a rehabilitation center for wounded soldiers in Atlantic City, New Jersey. In mid-1946, Inouye was transferred to the Percy Jones Army Hospital in Battle Creek, Michigan, to continue with rehabilitation for 9 months. While recovering there, Inouye met future Republican Senator and presidential candidate Bob Dole. Bob Dole met him. He did. Now, Bob Dole was a fellow patient. The two became friends and would often play bridge together. Dole shared with Inouye his long-term plans to attend law school and become an attorney, and later run for United States legislator and eventually United States Congress. With Inouye's plans to become a surgeon pretty much dashed due to his injuries, Dole's plan for a career in public service inspired Inouye to consider entering politics himself. Inouye ultimately beat Dole to Congress. Now, the two remained lifelong friends. In 2003, the hospital was renamed the Hart-Dole-Inouye Federal Center in honor of the 2 World War II veterans, as well as Democratic Senator Phil Hart, who had been a patient at the hospital after sustaining injuries on D-Day. Now, Inouye was honorably discharged with the rank of captain in May of 1947 after 20 months of rehabilitation. At the time, he was the recipient of the Bronze Star, Distinguished Service Cross, and 3 Purple Hearts. Many of his regiment believed that, were he not Japanese American, he would have been awarded the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military award. Inouye eventually received the Medal of Honor on June 21st, year 2000, from President Bill Clinton, along with 19 other Japanese American servicemen in the 442nd. Now, Inouye decided to study law, hoping that it would lead him to a political career. He enrolled at the University of Hawaii in Manoa in late of 1947 as a pre-law student majoring in government and economics. He relied on the financial benefits of the GI Bill to fund his education. When not in class, Inouye would volunteer at the Honolulu County Democratic Committee. He had been talked into joining the party by John A. Burns, a former police captain and future governor who had ties to the Japanese American community. Now, in between this time, he met a speech instructor named Margaret Awamar at the university, whom he married in 1948. After graduating in 1950, Inouye moved with his wife to Washington, D.C., so he could continue his studies at George Washington University Law School. While there, he volunteered at the Democratic National Committee, headquartered to gain more experience to bring back with him to Hawaii. Now, Inouye earned his JD degree in 2 years and moved back with his wife to Hawaii in late 1952. Inouye then spent the next year studying for the Hawaii bar exam and volunteering for the Democratic Party. After passing the bar exam in August 1953, Inouye was appointed assistant public prosecutor for the city and county of Honolulu by the city mayor and fellow Democrat John Wilson. At the urging of Burns, Inouye successfully ran for the Hawaii Territorial House of Representatives in November 1954's election, representing the 4th District. The election came to be known as the Hawaii Democratic Revolution of 1954, as the long-entrenched Republican control of Hawaii Territory legislature abruptly ended with the wake of Democratic candidates taking their seats. Now, Inouye was immediately elected Majority Leader. He served 2 terms there and elected to the Hawaii Territorial Senate in 1957. Midway through Inouye's first term in the territorial state, Hawaii achieved statehood. Now, he won the seat in the U.S. House of Representatives as Hawaii's first full member and took office in August 21st of 1959. The same date, Hawaii became a state. Prior to his death, Inouye announced that he planned to run for a record 10th term in 2016, when he would have been 92 years old. He also said, "I have told my staff and I have told my family that when the time comes when you question my sanity or question my ability to do the things physically or mentally, I don't want you to hesitate. Do everything to get me out of there, because I want to make certain the people of Hawaii get the best representation possible." Another reason I think this guy was super badass. Now, in 2012, Inouye began using a wheelchair to preserve his knees. He received an oxygen concentrator to aid his breathing, and in November of 2012, he made several trips to the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center because of injuries. On December 17th, he died of complications to some injuries. His final words, "Aloha." Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid announced Inouye's death on the floor of the Senate, referring to Inouye as certainly one of the giants of the Senate. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell referred to Inouye as one of the finest senators in the United States history. Inouye's body laid in state at the United States Capitol Rotunda on December 20th, 2012. Quick rundown of some things. In 2007, the Citadel dedicated the Inouye Hall at the Citadel, South Carolina Army National Guard Marksmanship Center to Senator Inouye, who helped make the center possible. In May of 2013, Secretary of the Navy Ray Mambus announced the next Arleigh Burke-class destroyer would be named the U.S. Daniel Inouye DDG-118. The destroyer was officially christened at Bath Iron Works on June 22nd, 1919. In November 2013, the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association renamed its Trailblazing Award in honor of Inouye, honoring him with the Senator Daniel K. Inouye Trailblazing Award. In December 2013, the Advanced Technical Solar Telescope in Halakala Observatory on the Maui Island was renamed the Daniel K. Inouye Solar Telescope. The Hawaiian Air National Guard Daniel K. Inouye Fighter Squadron Operation and Aircraft Maintenance Facility was christened in 2014. Senator Daniel K. Inouye Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency building was named in 2015. And I could really speak for another 20 minutes on just the things named after this total badass. But let's get to the point. Daniel Ken Inouye, at an early age, showed that the belief in the American system is greater than any other calling. That's why I'm calling it once again, Daniel K. Inouye, 100% total American badass. Sources for this story from Wikipedia was U.S. Senate Daniel K. Inouye, a featured biography. Daniel K. Inouye, World War II U.S. Army Medal of Honor recipient. We thank everybody for tuning in for another episode of GunsIn701.com's Badass of the Week. We try to pick somebody every week and give you a little something for history. Don't forget about our podcast every Wednesday night on all your social media platforms, GunsIn701.com, at 6 p.m. Mountain Time and 7 p.m. Central Time. If you notice, we got that QR code up in the corner. Hey, if you like our show and you want to help us out, a couple bucks here or there, whatever, we would love to hear from you. You can scan on that, get right to that. Any little bit will help. getting our studios up to par and keeping everything running. It's an ongoing thing, so we can always use your help. Also, don't forget to check out our store at gunsin the701.com, where you can also buy some of our merch and more. And, of course, well, that stuff makes you look cool, so I don't care what anybody says. I think you look cool in it. Anyway, make sure you check that out. And tune in next week for our gunsin the701.com's Badass of the Week. Until then, I'm Mike, reminding you, as my friend Clay always says, keep your powder dry and stay safe, you bunch of badasses. Located at 309 South Washington Street in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Give them a call at 701-258-6308.
The team of mechanics at Lauer Auto can take care of any problem your vehicle is having. And when you do business with Lauer, you can be assured you're doing business with a pro Second Amendment America First repair shop. There are plenty of other auto repair shops in the Bismarck-Mandan area. But why take a chance at patronizing a shop that might not have your beliefs at heart? Make no mistake. Lauer Auto is your pro Second Amendment repair shop. When you talk to the guys at Lauer Auto, don't forget to tell them that you heard they are a sponsor of Guns and the 701 and that you appreciate their support of our pro Second Amendment, pro North Dakota live stream and podcast. That's Lauer Auto Repair, 701-258-6308.
701-258-6308.
Located 309 South Washington Street in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Experience the exhilaration of power in your hands at Bloodline Kinetics. Why Cerakote? Simply, it aids in firearm preservation while also giving your piece a unique look. Barrel threading, NFA laser engraving, bolt handle threading, mount, level, and bore, sight scope chamber, rebarreling, and much more. Bloodline Kinetics is meant to reflect a long American lineage in gun ownership, who stand for the Second Amendment rights, Bloodline, and the science behind gun accuracy, Kinetics. To some, it's just a constitutional right that can go away. To us, it's in our American bloodline, and we believe it should stay that way. Here at Bloodline Kinetics, we understand that hunters, sportsmen, women, and gun owners should have a quality firearm. Stop and see us at 2008 Morrison Avenue 2 in Bismarck, North Dakota, 58504, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Call 701-390-7997. Visit our website, bloodlinekinetics.com.
Anvil Brand LLC, raising and training tomorrow's barrel horses right out of Bismarck, North Dakota. Tracy and her family are great American patriots who not only support the Second Amendment, but they also promoted what you're looking for, top quality barrel horses. Go ahead and give Tracy a call at 701-471-6629 and tell them Guns and 701.com sent you. That's Anvil Brand LLC out of Bismarck, North Dakota.
Like Michael, the flow like Aubrey. Walk around thinking I'm a prince like Saudi. Mismatched Converse, t-shirts tucked in. Know my worth, can't tell me nothing. White Nikes, albino, can cop my stilo. Head to the top, bottom line is a motto.
Everybody, welcome back to Guns and the 701.com and our weekly Badass of the Week. This week, we're covering Army Sergeant Bill Falk. Now, he was an Army Ranger at Fort Lewis, Washington, when he purchased a cheap house in a rough Tacoma neighborhood as an investment in 1989. Now, to help protect that investment, he was determined to help push the drugs and gangs out by any means necessary. He had no idea he was about to see combat from his own living room. Now, the late 80s and 90s saw a new peak in gang violence in America. Unlike other periods of gang activity, these years were particularly dangerous for some areas of the country. Now, the late 80s were also the peak of the crack epidemic, because crack is whack. Drug-related crimes surged 180% through the decade. That, according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, Tacoma was considered ground zero for gang activity in Washington state. Now, Falk did what any of us would do. He was concerned that his house on Ash Street, his block, was being used to deal crack cocaine. Now, he purchased his house for $10,000 with the idea that property values would rise. He was set on ensuring that the drug-ridden neighborhood would become safe from gangs and drug dealers sooner rather than later. Now, he began to videotape the people who visited the suspected drug houses. He wasn't wrong. The occupants were members of the Crips. Now, from here on out, we'll be referring to the Crips as dumbasses because, well, it's self-explanatory. The Dumbasses were a street gang that was spreading from California to Washington in search of new markets for drugs. Now, don't get me wrong. At the same times that the Dumbasses were dealing crack, white kids all over the United States were doing their own drugs from coast to coast. Now, Falk told the Associated Press that gang members began to threaten him when they noticed that he was filming their movements. When he feared that the gang was about to take action against him, well, he called his friends from the 2nd Ranger Battalion to his house to have a, quote, party and be present in case the house was attacked. Again, he was not wrong. Just after the Rangers arrived on September 23rd of 1989, some 15 to 20 gang members, i.e. dumbasses, began to shoot up the 32-year-old's house while his buddies were inside. Now, luckily, the Rangers had brought their own party supplies in the form of weapons. Now, the dumbasses were probably a bit surprised that their would-be victim's house began to return fire. For an estimated 10 to 30 minutes, the two groups exchanged intense fire in a gun battle. Now, that was on the streets of a residential Tacoma. Witnesses said hundreds of rounds from handguns, shotguns, and semi-automatic weapons were fired, and somehow no one was hurt. After a while, because it usually takes them a while, the police arrived on the scene and the shooting stopped. Now, all but 2 members of the gang fled. Those 2 were arrested, but only one was actually charged. And he was let go soon after because our justice system is foobarred. Now, the Rangers' weapons were confiscated by the authorities, but the Army considered the event necessary for their self-defense. Now, this is a quote from Major Clyde Newman of the 2nd Ranger Battalion that he told the AP News Service.
From everything I am told by the city police, the Rangers were right. They were having a party, and they were attacked. They returned fire. I expect nothing less.
The incident was a turning point for the city of Tacoma. It brought national attention to the gang issue in the city streets and prompted residents to take more active roles in policing their neighborhoods. Because Lord knows policing doesn't come from the police. As of October 2020, that house that Falk had bought and that his fellow Rangers defended is worth $447,000. That, according to real estate website Redfin. And the Hilltop neighborhood that saw an outbreak of violence is one of Tacoma's quietest. Sometimes it just takes a spark, right? As usual, when you're dealing with gangs, i.e. dumbasses, they were a bit shocked when the Army Rangers took up proper defense positions and returned fire, protecting themselves and their neighborhood, because drug-dealing gangs are notoriously cowardice. Now, the shootout on Ash Street was wild and chaotic, but eventually, Tacoma's Hilltop neighborhood became one of the city's safest. As for Staff Sergeant Falk, his investment became an incredible success. It pretty much all sums down to one simple thing: crack is whack. No, the other thing. Army Sergeant Bill Falk and his buddies are true badasses. Now, sources for this story were thewarhistoryonline.com with Todd Neatkirk, military.com with Blake Stillwell, and Popomedic Podcast. We thank everybody for tuning in for GunsInThe701.com's Badass of the Week. If I insulted you as a gang member out there listening to this, well, I don't care, dumbass. Remember, if you've got a Badass of the Week you want to hear about here on GunsInThe701.com, all you got to do is email us. And you can do that by going to guns@GunsInThe701.com. And as you can see that little QR code up in the corner, you can click on that and, of course, donate a little cash to us to help us out as we improve our studios and keep the podcast running. Anything you got, 5, 10, 15, 20, will be appreciated. Plus, don't forget to check out our store at gunsinthe701.com and pick yourself up some merch. And as always, we do appreciate everybody tuning in for gunsinthe701.com and gunsinthe701.com's Badass of the Week. As my buddy Clay always says, keep your powder dry and stay safe, you bunch of badasses. Everybody, it's time once again for gunsinthe701.com's Badass of the Week. This week, we're covering Charles Alvin Beckwith. Charles Alvin Beckwith was born in Atlanta, Georgia, January 1929 to parents Elza Dozier Beckwith and Clara Eugenia Beckwith. He was an all-state football player for his high school team. He later enrolled in the University of Georgia, where he was a member of the Delta chapter of Sigma Chi fraternity and ROTC. Now, Beckwith lettered in football with the Bulldogs and was approached by the Green Bay Packers for the 1950-51 NFL Draft, but he turned it down in favor of a military career. Now, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army in 1952. Now, since the Korean War was over, the second lieutenant Beckwith, he served as a platoon leader with Charlie Company, 17th Infantry Regiment, 7th Infantry Division in South Korea. In 1955, Beckwith was assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division as the commander of the Combat Support Company of the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment. In 1958, after completing Ranger School, Beckwith joined with Special Forces and was assigned to the 7th Special Force Group. In 1960, then Captain Beckwith deployed to Laos for 2 years on Operation Hotfoot.
Now, a little backstory on Hotfoot, originally known as Operation Ambidextrous, was a secretive military training mission from the United States in support of the Kingdom of Laos. It ran from January 22nd of 1959 through the 19th of April of 1961. Now, working in civilian clothing in conjunction with French military mission, it concentrated on technical training of the Royal Laos Army. Back to the story.
In 1962, Beckwith was sent as an exchange officer to the British 22 Special Air Service Regiment, or SAS, where he commanded 3-troop A Squadron. Now, he conducted wartime guerrilla operations with the SAS during the Malayan emergency. Now, in the jungle, he contracted a case of leptospirosis, so severe the doctors did not expect him to survive. However, he made a full recovery in months, despite the severe pulmonary hemorrhage syndrome.
Sounds painful just to say, doesn't it?
Now, upon his return to England, Beckwith presented a detailed report outlining the Army's vulnerabilities in not having an SAS-type unit. Now, for several years, Beckwith, who was still a captain, submitted and resubmitted the report to Army brass. That same Army brass repeatedly thwarted his efforts. Now, Special Forces leadership at the time thought that they had enough on their hands and did not need the trouble of creating a new unit. They were wrong. Meanwhile, as the 7th Special Forces Group Airborne Operations Officer, Beckwith went to work revolutionizing Green Beret training because, in his words, Green Berets kind of had it easy. Special Forces at the time focused on unconventional warfare and especially foreign internal defense, i.e., training indigenous personnel in resistance activities. But Beckwith recognized that before a Special Forces Green Beret soldier could become a good unconventional soldier, he first had to be a good conventional one. Because, in his words,
because I had commanded a rifle and a weapons company, I was appalled on arriving in Special Forces to find officers who had never commanded conventional operations training from a real-world lesson.
Now, he had learned that with the SAS. Beckwith also that a symbol of excellence, like a Green Beret, had to be earned. Officers were being assigned to Special Forces straight out of War College with no prior special ops experience and were given their Green Berets on arrival. Beckwith instituted the hard-nosed and practical training standards that would lend themselves to the birth of the modern Q course. Now, Q Force, or the Special Forces Qualification Course, is the initial formal training program for entry into the United States Army Special Forces. In 1965, Beckwith volunteered to return to Vietnam, where he was selected to command the high-priority Special Forces Unit Project Delta, Operational Detachment B-52. Now, he used his SAS experience that the Brits had taught him to test and select men for long-range reconnaissance operations in South Vietnam. Now, following his promotion to Major, Beckwith led B-52 in the rescue of a besieged Special Forces camp at the Siege of Plai My, during which President Lyndon B. Johnson requested to speak to him directly over radio in order to congratulate and encourage him. His iron fist disciplinarian style of running of a camp is described in detail in CBS News journalist John Lawrence's book, The Cat from Hugh. Now, Beckwith was critically wounded in early 1966. And when I say that, let me remind you, he took a 50 caliber bullet to the abdomen. Now, when I think of a 50 caliber bullet going into your gut, I kind of think of this. Yeah, it was so bad, the medical personnel triaged him as beyond help for the second time in his military career. This time, again, Beckwith made a full recovery and went on to overhaul the Florida phase of the United States Army Ranger School. Beckwith transformed this phase from a scripted exercise based upon the Army's World War II experiences into a Vietnam-oriented jungle training regiment. In 1968, following the Tet Offensive, then Lieutenant Colonel Beckwith returned to South Vietnam, taking command of the 2nd Battalion, 327th Infantry Airborne, 1st Brigade, 101st Airborne Division. For the 9 months that he commanded the 2-327 No Slack, they saw many successes in combat operations, including Hugh, Operation Mingo, Operation Jeb Stuart, Operation Nevada Eagle, and Operation Somerset Plain, which was sweeping the southern portions of the Shao Valley. The toughest job of the battalion was cleaning out a 7-kilometer stretch of Route 547 running west of Hugh, eventually defeating determined NVA defenders so that fire support base Bastogne could be established. From 1973 to 1974, now Beckwith served as commander, Control Team B, with the Joint Casualty Resolution Center, or JCRC, located at Nakhon Phanom, Thailand, under the command of Brigadier General Robert C. Kingston. JCRC's sole mission was to assist the secretaries of the armed services to resolve the fate of servicemen still missing and unaccounted for as a result of hostilities throughout Indochina. Now, the JCRC had a predominantly operational role, the carrying out of field search, excavation, recovery, and repatriation activities. Now, he was promoted to colonel in 1975 and returned to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, as the commander of the U.S. Army's Special Warfare School.
Now, they changed the name of Fort Bragg. For some reason, but that's not for me to go into.
Now, although Beckwith had presented proposals throughout the 60s for a superbly elite, highly autonomous direct action unit, the idea had sat on the shelf for decades. Finally, in the mid-70s, as the threat of international terrorism became imminent, Beckwith was appointed to form his unit. Now, during that time, Beckwith was forming his unit. Counterterrorism duties fell to the Special Forces community. The 5th Special Forces Group quickly formed the Counterterrorism Unit Blue Light to fill in until Delta was fully operational. Now, the 1st Special Forces Operation Detachment Delta was the establishment on 17th of November of 1977 by Beckwith and Colonel Thomas M. Henry as counterterrorism units based on a model of the British Special Air Services, but with greater focus on hostage rescue in addition to covert operations and specializing in reconnaissance. Beckwith led Delta Force's first mission, Operation Eagle Claw, Now, the assault on the captured American embassy in Tehran early in 1980. Now, the mission was aborted due to helicopter failures during a sandstorm and a subsequent crash, which led to several deaths.
Now, back up a little bit, little backstory on that one. Beckwith had gotten everybody handpicked for this mission. All the pilots for those helicopters were then replaced by higher-ups in other agencies other than the ones they had trained, because everybody wanted to have their fingers in the pie and take responsibility for the big win in rescuing the embassy hostages. And because they did that, the untrained and uninitiated pilots weren't there. One of the reasons why they had so many problems with the helicopters and why it led to the failure of the mission.
You let your bosses take control, and everything is foobarred. Now, after the debacle in the desert, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment was formed to provide aviation support to Delta Force and other special operation units. JSOC was also formed, directly based on Beckwith recommendations during Senate investigations into the mission's failures. Now, Beckwith was married to Catherine Beckwith, and they had 3 daughters. One daughter, Constance Connie Howe, is a former United States Army Reserve major and married to Delta Force Master Sergeant Paul R. Howe, who fought in the Battle of Mogadishu in 1993, the whole Black Hawk Down situation. His granddaughter, United States Air Force Technical Sergeant Mary Howe, now Danielle, is an aerial gunner on the 4th Special Operations Squadron. A second daughter, Margaret Kazmarinsky, served as an Army captain in the Judge Advocate General's Corps, or JAG, and her son, Captain Zachary Kazaminsky, graduated from West Point in 2017. Following his disappointment at the failure of the Iranian operation, Beckwith retired from the Army. He started a consulting firm and wrote a book about Delta Force. In 1994, he died at his home of natural causes. Beckwith's remains are interred at Fort Sam Houston National Cemetery in San Antonio, Texas. Nothing could take this guy down other than natural causes itself. He was truly 100% a badass. Hey, thanks everybody for listening to our Badass of the Week from GunsInThe701.com. Every week we try to give you a new badass from history, and it ain't always easy. So if you got time to click on the little QR code up in the corner, you can check out our website, buy some of our merch at GunsInThe701.com. You can even donate us a little money if you got it. Just something to spare. 5, 10, 15, how about $20,000? Hey, I need a new studio. My studio is underneath a bathroom right now, and every time my wife flushes, it sounds like a torrent of water is pouring into my microphone. Anyway, I'm just saying, if you happen to be really rich and want to write it off on your taxes, that's a good idea. Anyway, check out GunsInThe701.com every Wednesday on all your social media platforms and at GunsInThe701.com. Don't forget about 701 Nation, JD's spinoff show with some great stuff as well. And we got that coming up bi-monthly as well. And if you got someone that you want us to talk about in the Badasses segment, well, you can always do that by emailing us, guns@GunsInThe701.com. That's GUNSANDTHE701.com. As always, keep your powder dry and stay safe. Everybody, we're back on GunsInThe701.com and our Badass of the Week. This week, well, for as long as there have been wars, there have been warriors who have found a second life on the battlefield. Bloodied, maimed, shot, cut open, stabbed, stepped on, and everything else, they're the ones that should have perished, but who nevertheless managed to stay alive and keep fighting. For example, General Frederick M. Franks was the commander behind the left hook of the American invasion of Iraq in Desert Storm. Franks' armored formations surged north into Iraq and toppled over dozens of Republican Guard divisions. He led the whole operation with one leg. Frank began his career in 1959, received an award for valor in Vietnam before heading off to Cambodia, where he was injured by a grenade in 1970, and the doctors were forced to amputate much of his left leg. He asked the Army for permission to continue to serve and eventually made it to a 4-star rank. Now, Alexei Marisev had just graduated flight training when the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union, and he was called to fly against the technologically advanced Luftwaffe. And in June of 1942, the young pilot was shot down over German-occupied territory. He had to crawl for 18 days back to the Russian lines. Now, the frostbite and the injuries from the wreck resulted in both his legs being amputated. But Marisev fought his way back to active duty, partially because he was already respected because of the 4 aerial kills he took before he was shot down. And in 1943, he again took to the air against the Nazis and shot down another 7 enemy aircraft before the war ended, earning him the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. Like Marisev, Douglas Bader was a respected pilot who lost his legs in a crash. Now, Bader's injuries resulted from an air show crash in 1931. The Royal Air Force retired him, but said he might be able to return if war broke out. Now, he spent the next 8 years perfecting flight with prosthetics. And in 1939, he was admitted back into the RAF and learned how to fly Spitfires. His first aerial kill came while he covered the evacuation at Dunkirk. But he rose to legendary status in the Battle of Britain, where he had 23 kills before being shot down and captured on August 9th of 1941. Jean Danjou graduated from the French military school at Saint Cyr and joined the army as an officer after fighting Algerian nationalists in 1840. Now, he volunteered to serve in the French Foreign Legion, and at the Battle of Sevastopol, Danjou lost his left hand. In 1863, Danjou led a 66-man element which came under attack by approximately 2,000 Mexican soldiers. He led a fighting withdrawal to a nearby estate at Cameroon and rallied his men for an 11-hour battle. Now, the unit was nearly wiped out, but inflicted hundreds of Mexican casualties. Now, Danjou died in the fighting. His prosthetic hand is now paraded in France every year at a commemoration of the battle. The battle is sometimes described as France's Alamo. Then there's Rear Admiral Horatio Nelson, who was already a British hero when he lost his left arm at the Battle of Santa Cruz de Tenerife in 1797. For most, this would signal a time to quietly retire, especially since Nelson had already given an eye up for his country. Instead, Nelson went into Super Admiral mode and just started waging even more intense battles against the French. In his 1798 victory at the Battle of the Nile, he stopped Napoleon's plans to conquer Egypt and threaten British-controlled India. And it was Nelson who defeated Napoleon's attempt to cross the English Channel and conquer Britain in 1805 at the Battle of Trafalgar. Lieutenant John B. Hood had already suffered a severe arm injury when he lost a leg at the Battle of Chickamauga in Georgia in 1863, with the Confederacy fighting for its life. Hood took a short convalescence and quickly returned to his command. He repeatedly attacked Union Major General William Sherman's troops in an attempt to stop the March to the Sea and relieve the pressure on Atlantans in 1864. Now, after fighting there, Hood led troops in defense of Tennessee in the Battle of Franklin and Nashville, with the Union Army marching south. He attempted to rally troops in Texas in 1865, but was eventually captured. Now, all those badasses lead up to this badass, who would give you 2 thumbs up on this if he still had thumbs. We're talking about Galvarino, a warrior who not only overcame a brutal injury, but used it to mold himself into something straight out of your worst nightmare. 500 years ago, in what was the early years of South America's protracted Arauco War, an army of Spanish conquistadors routed several thousand Mapuche Indians in the Battle of Laguanadas in south-central Chile, near the Biobío River. The Spanish captured 150 Mapuche prisoners, among them a young chieftain named Galvarino, and marched them back to the Spanish encampment. Now, after a swift and no doubt impartial trial, Governor Garcia Herato de Mendoza, the Spanish leader, ordered troops to sever the right hand and noses of each warrior and both hands of leaders like Galvernio. The gruesome act would be a message to the Mapuche: either submit or else. And according to Mapuche legends, after Galvernio's left hand was hacked off, he bravely offered up his right and watched the hatchet fall without flinching. He then asked his torturers to deliver the killing blow, a request that they denied. Now, Galvernio and a dozen other mutilated warriors were then freed and ordered to tell their Mapuche general to surrender and prevent further bloodshed. Galvernio did no such thing. Instead, after he made it back, he urged his general and his people to continue to fight against the Spanish intruders. As described by Pedro Marino de Labero in the Chronicles of the Kingdom of Chile, Galvernio went before the Mapuche people, handless arms raised in the air, and told them what had been done to him, the Spanish would do to everyone else if they gave up. Their leaders declared that the Mapuche would strike back against the Spaniards, and he named Galvernio one of his commanders. But what good was a handless fighter against the enemy? Very little, as Galvernio knew well what he did next made him a badass. Before the next offensive, he fastened knives to both of his wrists. There's no record of how big the knives were or how sharp, though we'd like to imagine gleaming blades sprouting from his stumps. Historian Leslie Ray has referred to them as lances. On November 30th, 1557, less than a month after his capture, Galvernio was on the front line of what became known as the Battle of Mailarapu. The plan was to ambush the Spanish encampment and overwhelm Mendoza before he could turn his big guns, the cannons, and horses on the warriors. But the Mapuche sprang the trap too quickly, and despite initial success at stymieing Mendoza's cavalry, the commander managed to hit the native attackers with cannon fire, opening up a seam for his horsemen to ride through and sow chaos. In all, 3,000 Mapuche were killed, compared to only minor injuries and scores of dead horses on the Spanish side. Now, there were several hundred Mapuche captured. Galvernio was among them. Now, there's little evidence relating Galvernio's performance during the battle. Jerónimo de Villar, a Spanish soldier who later wrote on the account of the Arauco Wars, titled Chronicles, wrote that Galvernio motioned his warriors forward with his bladed arms, yelling, "Nobody is allowed to flee, but die, because you die defending your mother country." Villar also noted that Galvernio went up against Mendoza's squadron and managed to cut down the general's second in command after the battle. There would be no third chance for Galvernio. He and his men were sentenced to hang. Alonso de Ecasilla, a Spanish aide who would later write the epic poem La Araucana, claimed that he tried to intervene on Galvernio's behalf, entreating him to join the Spanish, to which Galvernio reportedly replied, "I would rather die than live like you. I am only sorry that my death will keep me from tearing you to pieces with my teeth." Some claim Mendoza threw Galvernio to the dogs, while others say he was hanged. Still others believe that Galvernio killed himself first to rob his captors of the pleasure. No matter what, the Arauco War would continue for nearly 300 years, with the Mapuche continuously resisting colonization by the Spanish. Now, the story of Galvernio was a rallying cry for the Mapuche. Galvernio's story has served perhaps more than any other to perpetuate the Mapuche's reputation for courage and tenacity. And with that, our story comes to an end. Definitely, 100%. Galvernio's was a super double-bladed badass. The sources for this were mentalfloss.com by Jeff Wells from December 10th, 2014, as well as wearethemighty.com and Wikipedia. Hey, thanks everybody for tuning in for GUNSIN701.com and our Badass of the Week. Every week, we try to give you another badass of history you just may not have heard of. If you've got a badass you want to hear about, well, there's one simple thing to do. guns@gunsin701.com. You can email us and tell us about the badass you want us to talk about. And while you're on the computer or your phone or whatever else, why not head on over to gunsina701.com and check out all our merch we've got for sale, backstories, back videos, and everything else. Plus, you see that little QR code up in the corner there? You can click on that as well and donate money. Now, everybody's going through a tough time right now, so here's the deal. If you can spare $5, $10, or whatever else, we would appreciate it. It helps us keep our studios up to snuff, and Lord knows it just is not as cheap as they make it out to be to do podcasts. So we'd love any help from you. Don't forget to tune in for Badass of the Week again next week on gunsina701.com and all our social media platforms. And as my buddy Clay always says, keep your powder dry and stay safe, you badasses. Hey everybody, it's Mike for GunsInThe701.com's Badass of the Week. That's right, every week we bring you a new and exciting badass of history. This week we're covering what they like to call the softer side of the species, the female. Nancy Wake. She may have been beautiful, she may have been soft, but at the same time, she was deadly. Born in Roseneath, Wellington, New Zealand, on 30th of August, 1912, Wake was the youngest of 6 children. She was a Maori through her great-grandmother. In 1914, her family moved to Australia and settled at North Sydney. Shortly thereafter, her father, Charles Augustus Wake, returned to New Zealand, and her mother, Ella Wake, raised the children on her own. In Sydney, Wake attended the North Sydney Household Arts Home Science School. At the age of 16, she ran away and worked as a nurse. With 200 pounds in her pocket that she inherited from her aunt, she journeyed to New York City, then London, and there she trained herself as a journalist. In the 1930s, she worked in Paris and later for Hearst newspapers as a European correspondent. Now, she witnessed the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi movement and saw the roving Nazi gangs randomly beating up Jewish men and women in the streets of Vienna. In 1937, Wake met wealthy French industrialist Henry Edmond Fiocca, whom she married on the 30th of November, 1939. Now, she was living in Marseille, France, when Germany invaded. Now, during the war in France, Wake served as an ambulance driver. After the fall of France in 1940, she joined the escape network of Captain Ian Garrow, which became the Pat O'Leary Line. Now, the Gestapo called her the White Mouse, you know, because they were good at downplaying the fact that she was killing all of them. Anyway, I don't know. Could have given her something a little better than that, but oh well. The resistance exercised caution with her missions. Her life was in constant danger, with the Gestapo tapping her telephones and intercepting her mail. In November of 1942, the Wehrmacht troops occupied Vichy, France. In case you don't know, Vichy, France means the French that capitulated to the Nazis and helped them. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to spit in French. Peuh, mon Dieu. Now, Operation Torch started then. This gave the Germans and the Gestapo unrestricted access to all parts of Vichy, France, and made life more dangerous for Wake. When the network was betrayed that same year, she decided to flee France. Her husband, Henry Fiocca, I'll never get his name right, but there we go, he stayed behind. Now, he was later captured, tortured, and executed by the Gestapo, but during the entire war, Nancy didn't know this. Now, Wake described her tactics as a little powder and a little drink on the way, and I'd pass their German post and wink and say, "Do you want to search me? God, what a flirtatious little bastard I was." That was her talking, by the way. Now, in early 1943, in the process of getting out of France, Wake was picked up with a whole trainload of people and was arrested in Toulouse, but was released 4 days later. Now, the head of the O'Leary line, Albert Girassi, he managed to have her released by claiming she was his mistress and was trying to conceal her infidelity to her husband, all of which was untrue. Now, she succeeded in crossing the Pyrenees to Spain, and until the end of the war, she was unaware her husband's death, which she subsequently blamed herself for. Now, most of the operations of Wake's SOE, or the Special Operations Executive, we'll just say SOE from now on, were in or near Allier Department. Now, after reaching Britain, Wake joined the Special Operations Executives, or SOE, a British organization formed in the 1940s to conduct espionage, sabotage, and reconnaissance in German-occupied Europe and to aid local resistance movements. And she was trained in several programs. Vera Atkins, who was the senior female in the SOE overseeing the agents going into France, recalls her as a real Australian bombshell. Tremendous vitality, flashing eyes. Everything she did well. Training reports record that she was very good and a very fast shot and possessed excellent fieldcraft. She was noted to put men to shame by her cheerful spirit and strength of character. Now, on the 29th through the 30th of April 1944, as part of a 3-person freelance team headed by John Hind Farmer, codenamed Herbert, Wake parachuted into Auvergne province in France. Resistance leader Henry Tardivat discovered Wake tangled in a tree. He remarked, "Hope that all the trees in France bear such beautiful fruits this year." To which she replied, "Cut out that bullshit and get me out of this damn tree." Dennis Rake, a radio operator, was the third member of the team. Now, the team was to be a liaison between London and the local Marquise group, or French resistance, headed by Émile Collandon, codenamed Gaspard. Now, SOE began sending large amounts of arms, equipment, and money. No word if they sent lawyers. Wake's duties were pinpointing locations at which the materials and monies were parachuted in, collecting it, allocating it among Marquise, including pay to individual soldiers. Wake carried with her a list of the targets the Marquise were to destroy before the invasion of France by the Allies, which would take place on June 6. Now, the destruction of communication lines and other facilities throughout France would hinder German response to the invasion. Now, the reach of the Marquise exceeded their grasp. On May 20th, Callandon, or known as Gaspard, declared a general mobilization of resistance fighters, collecting in total about 7,000 men divided into 3 groups. His objective was to demonstrate that the resistance was able to liberate areas from the Germans with its own forces. On June 2nd, the Germans launched a probing attack on Gaspard's base at Mount Monchet. On the 10th of June, the Germans launched a larger attack, and on the 20th of June encircled Gaspard's position and forced the resistance fighters to flee after taking heavy casualties. Wake and the members of her team accompanied groups of the Marquise in a 3-day, 150-kilometer retreat westward to the village of Saint-Satin. I know I butchered that in French, and I don't care. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. During the flight from the Germans, Rake, the radio operator, left his radio equipment and codes behind. You would think that would be the first thing he would grab, but the SOE team needed to be in contact with London. Now, the nearest SOE radio and operator were in Châteauroux. Wake said that she borrowed a bicycle and rode it to Châteauroux, found a radio nearby, updated London on the situation, and then bicycled back to Saint-Satin, traveling 500 kilometers in 72 hours. Fortunately for her, there were few Germans in the area through which she had bicycled. Now, after her bicycle ride, the freelance team, with another recent arrival named Roger, a 19-year-old American Marine, returned to Allier Department to join the resistance groups of Henry Tardivat, who was the guy who discovered her tangled in the tree. In July, 2 more Americans, Reeve Shiley and John de Koven Alsop, they joined the team as instructors. Neither spoke much French, and Shealy was nearly blind, if not wearing his thick lens eyeglasses. But he actually impressed the Marquis with his immaculately tailored military uniform. Both proved to be effective instructors. Now, Wake said that she and Tardevant initiated a series of attacks on German convoys and fought off an attack on their camp by the Germans in which 7 French Marquis were killed. Her principal job, however, continued to be to organize the reception and distribution of arms and materials for the resistance groups, which was parachuted into Algiers nearly every other night. Wake claimed that she participated in the raids that destroyed a Gestapo headquarters in Montluchon, killing 38 Germans. At one point, Wake said she discovered that the men were using 3 girls as prostitutes and mistreating them. Now, she coerced the Marquis to release the women, to whom she provided a wash and new clothes. Now, Nancy Wake set 2 of the girls free, but feeling uneasy about the third, she suspected the third girl was a German spy. After interrogating and exposing her, Wake ordered the resistance group to shoot the informer. They did not have the heart to kill her in cold blood. But when Wake insisted that she would have performed the execution, they capitulated. Nancy Wake claimed that the girl spy spat at the French while facing the firing squad. Wake showed no regrets for the execution. Wake also said that she had killed an SS sentry with her bare hands to prevent him from raising the alarm during the raid. During the 1990s television interview, when asked what had happened to the sentry who spotted her, Wake simply drew her finger across her throat. They taught this judo chop stuff with the flat of the hand at SOE, and I practiced away at it, but this was the only time that I used it. Whack! And it killed him almost outright. She said, even I was surprised. After the invasion of southern France by the American military forces on August 15th, the resistance groups harried the retreating Germans. Her friends, Tardevant, was badly wounded and would lose a leg to amputation during the victory celebration in Vichy. Wake learned of the death of her husband in mid-September, and she and other members of the freelance team, their job complete, returned to Great Britain. Now, Nancy Wake did not like killing people, but in wartime, she once told an interviewer, and quote, "I don't see why women should just wave our men a proud goodbye and then sit around knitting them baklavas," unquote. In another quote, Wake said, "I was not a very nice person, and it did not put me off my breakfast." In another quote, she said, "I was never afraid. I was too busy to be afraid." Immediately after the war, she was awarded the George Medal, the United States Medal of Freedom, the Medal de la Résistance, and thrice the Croix de Guerre. Now, she worked for the intelligence department at the British Air Ministry, attached to the embassies in Paris and Prague. Wake left Australia and moved back to England. She worked as an intelligence officer in the department of the Assistant Chief of the Air Staff of the Air Ministry in Whitehall. She resigned in 1957 after marrying an RAF officer, John Forward, in December of that year. They relocated to Australia in early 1960s, maintaining her interest in politics. Wake was endorsed as a candidate at the 1966 federal elections for the Sydney seat of Kingsford Smith, and despite recording a swing of 6.9% against the sitting Labour member, Wake was again unsuccessful. Around 1985, Wake and John Forward left Sydney to retire to Port Macquarie. In 1985, Wake published her autobiography, The White Mouse. Later, after 40 years of marriage, her second husband, John Forward, died at Port Macquarie on the 19th of August in 1997. The couple had no children. Now, she had sold her medals to fund herself, saying, "There was no point in keeping them. I'll probably just go to hell, and they'll melt anyway." In 2001, Wake left Australia for the last time and immigrated to London. In 2003, Wake chose to move to the Royal Star and Garter Home for Disabled Ex-Service Men and Women in Richmond, London, where she remained until her death. Wake died on August 7th, 2011 at the age of 98 at Kingston Hospital after being admitted with a chest infection. She had requested that her ashes be scattered at Montluchon in central France. Her ashes were scattered near the village of Vernix, which is near that location, on the 11th of March of 2013. She is the inspiration for many female protagonists written in both spy movies and more. Nancy Wake didn't want to just sit around and knit. She wanted to be part of the action. She wanted to have her hands dirty, and she did exactly that. And Nancy Wake is a true 100% badass. Thanks for tuning in to our weekly Badass of the Week right here on GunsIn701.com. Every week, we try to give you a new badass, and we always like to have your suggestions if you got someone in history that deserves that status. You can contact us at guns@gunsin the701.com. And if you're feeling rather benevolent and would like to spare a little change, I know it's tough nowadays, but we always like to keep our equipment up to date, improve our studios and more, and have all kinds of new stuff for everybody. Well, you can drop us a line, of course, at that little QR code up in the corner to help us move along. You can also head over to gunsin the701.com and check out our store for all kinds of cool items that will look good on anybody. And check our back catalog of Guns in the 701 episodes, 701 Nation, and of course, our Badass of the Week. Until next week on gunsinthe701.com, I'm Mike, reminding you what my buddy Clay always says: keep your powder dry and stay safe, you bunch of badasses. Lauer Auto Repair, located at 309 South Washington Street in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Give them a call at 701-258-6308.
The team of mechanics at Lauer Auto can take care of any problem your vehicle is having. And when you do business with Lauer, you can be assured you're doing business with a pro Second Amendment America First repair shop. There are plenty of other auto repair shops in the Bismarck-Mandan area. But why take a chance at patronizing a shop that might not have your beliefs at heart? Make no mistake. Lauer Auto is your pro Second Amendment repair shop. When you talk to the guys at Lauer Auto, don't forget to tell them that you heard they are a sponsor of Guns and the 701 and that you appreciate their support of our pro Second Amendment, pro North Dakota live stream and podcast. That's Lauer Auto Repair, 701-258-6308.
701-258-6308.
Located 309 South Washington Street in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Experience the exhilaration of power in your hands at Bloodline Kinetics. Why Cerakote? Simply, it aids in firearm preservation while also giving your piece a unique look. Barrel threading, NFA laser engraving, bolt handle threading, mount, level, and bore, sight scope chamber rebarreling, and much more. Bloodline Kinetics is meant to reflect a long American lineage in gun ownership, who stand for the Second Amendment rights, Bloodline, and the science behind gun accuracy, Kinetics. To some, it's just a constitutional right that can go away. To us, it's in our American bloodline, and we believe it should stay that way. Here at Bloodline Kinetics, we understand that hunters, sportsmen, women, and gun owners should have a quality firearm. Stop and see us at 2008 Morrison Avenue 2 in Bismarck, North Dakota, 58504, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Call 701-390-7997. Visit our website, bloodlinekinetics.com.
Ever tried catching a fish with your bare hands or hunting a deer with a stick? Don't be that guy. At Mandan Sporting Goods, we've got all the hunting and camping gear you need. We're your one-stop shop for outdoor adventure.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Check us out at mandansportinggoods.com, or better yet, stop in to 210 East Main Street, Mandan, North Dakota. Mandan Sporting Goods, where the outdoors meets functionality. Store hours, Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Closed Sunday. Take up arms at Mandan Sporting Goods. Your adventure starts here.
Looking for the best gun gear for every and any situation? Little Angry Man Arms LLC has you covered. Top-notch guns from top-name brands like Winchester, Glock, Sig Sauer, and Ruger to essential extras from Magpul's, Streamlight, Hollow, Sun Optics, and more. Little Angry Man Arms LLC have everything to make your shooting adventures a success. Visit littleangrymanarms.com today and gear up for your next big hunt, competition, or home defense. Don't miss out on our exclusive deals. Little Angry Man Arms LLC, based in Trail City, South Dakota, your ultimate hunting partner.
Anvil Brand LLC, raising and training tomorrow's barrel horses right out of Bismarck, North Dakota. Tracy and her family are great American patriots who not only support the Second Amendment, but they also promoted what you're looking for, top quality barrel horses. Go ahead and give Tracy a call at 701-471-6629 and tell them Guns and 701.com sent you. That's Anvil Brand LLC out of Bismarck, North Dakota.
Yeah, hey, look, I got the moves like Michael, the flow like Aubrey. Walk around thinking I'm a prince like Saudi. Mismatched Converse, t-shirts tucked in, know my worth, can't tell me nothing. White Nikes, albino, can cop my stilo. Head to the top, bottom line is a model.
Welcome to Guns and the 701.com's Badass of the Week. This week, we're going back to World War I. You remember the war to end all wars? Yeah, that didn't work out too well. William Henry Johnson stated that he was born in Winston-Salem, North Carolina on July 5th of 1892. Now, he moved to Albany, New York when he was in his early teens and worked various jobs, such as a chauffeur, a soda mixer, and as a red cap porter at the Albany Union Station on Broadway. Henry Johnson enlisted in the United States Armed Forces on July 5th, 1917, as a 5'4" young man. This was almost 2 months after the American entry into World War I, and joining the all-black New York National Guard 15th Infantry Regiment, which, when mustered into federal service, was redesignated as the 369th Infantry Regiment, and he was then based in Harlem. The 369th was an all-black unit under the command of mostly white officers, including their commander, Colonel William Hayward. The idea of a black New York National Guard regiment had first been put forward by Charles W. Fillmore, Governor Charles Seymour Whitman, inspired by the brave showing of the Black 10th Cavalry in Mexico at the turn of the century. Now, they authorized the project. He appointed Colonel Hayward to carry out the task of organizing the unit, and Hayward gave Fillmore a commission as captain in the 15th Infantry Regiment, New York National Guard. The 369th got off to a rocky departure from the United States, making 3 attempts over a period of months to sail for France before finally getting out of sight of land. Even then, their transport, which had stopped and anchored before it could get out of the harbor due to a sudden snowstorm, was then struck by another ship due to poor visibility. The captain of the transport, the SS Pocahontas, wanted to turn back, much to the dismay of his passengers. The by now angry and impatient members of the 369th, led by Colonel William Hayward, took a very dim view of any further delays. Now, since damage to the ship was well above the waterline, the ship's captain admitted there was no danger of sinking. Hayward then informed the captain that he saw no reason to turn back, well, aside from cowardice. Hayward's men repaired the damage themselves, and the ship then sailed on. According to Hayward's notes, they landed at Brest in France, right side up, on December 27, 1917. They finally disembarked from the ship, though it would be many months before they were to see actual combat. The 369th Infantry joined the 185th Infantry Brigade upon arrival in France, but was relegated to labor service duties instead of combat training. The 185th Infantry Brigade was in turn assigned on January 5th, 1918, to the 93rd Infantry Division. Now, although General J. Pershing Commander-in-Chief of the American Expeditionary Forces, or the AEF, on the Western Front wished to keep the American forces autonomous. He loaned, in quotations, the 369th to the 161st Division of the French Army. Supposedly, the unreported and unofficial reason he was willing to detach the African American regiment from the U.S. command was that vocal white U.S. soldiers refused to fight alongside black troops. These black regiments suffered considerable harassment by the white soldiers and even denigration by the AEF headquarters, which went so far as to release the notorious pamphlet Secret Information Concerning Black American Troops, which warned the French civilian authorities of the alleged inferior nature and supposed tendencies of the African American troops. Yeah, Jim Crow reached far beyond the borders of America. Now, the French Army needed men and welcomed the reinforcements. The 369th Infantry Regiment was later nicknamed the Harlem Hellfighters. The French Army assigned Johnson's regiment to Outpost 20 on the edge of the Aragon Forest in the Champagne region. I know that's not how it's pronounced, it's a French thing, but hey, I'm not French. Now, they equipped them with French rifles and helmets. Now, while on observation post duty on the night of May 14, 1918, Johnson came under attack by a large German raiding party, which may have numbered up to 36 soldiers. Fearing for the life of his sleeping comrades and using grenades, the butt of his rifle, a bolo knife, and his bare fists, Johnson repelled the Germans, killing 4 while wounding others, and rescuing Needham Roberts of Trenton, New Jersey, from capture and saving the lives of his fellow soldiers. Johnson ended up suffering 21 wounds during the ordeal. This act of valor earned him the nickname from the French of the Black Death, a sign of respect for his prowess in combat. The story of Johnson's exploits first came to national attention in an article by Irving S. Cobbs entitled Young Black Joe, published in the August 24, 1918 Saturday Evening Post. Now, after returning home, Sergeant Johnson participated with his regiment in victory parades on Fifth Avenue in New York City in February of 1919. Johnson was then paid to take part of a series of lecture tours. He appeared one evening in St. Louis, but instead of delivering the expected tale of racial harmony in the trenches in France, he revealed the abuse that black soldiers had suffered and said that many changes need to happen for us as a country. But soon afterwards, and pretty much as a punishment no doubt, a warrant was issued for Johnson's arrest for violating the regulation governing wearing his uniform beyond the prescribed date of his commission. Typical? Pay a man to give a lecture in his uniform and then arrest him for wearing the uniform. America usually likes its heroes mute. Some things never change. Now, Johnson died on July 1st, 1929 in Washington, D.C. of myocarditis, also known as inflammatory cardiomyopathy, due to the inflammation of a heart muscle and also part of some of the wounds he suffered in that attack back in 1918. Now, he was buried at Arlington National Cemetery on July 6, 1929. In 1919, co-founder of the American Legion, Theodore Roosevelt Jr., son of former United States President Theodore Roosevelt, referred to Johnson as one of the 5 bravest Americans to have served in World War I. In June 2023, Fort Polk in Louisiana, a U.S. Army base, was renamed for Johnson. Now, the French government awarded Johnson the Croix de Guerre with a special citation and a golden palm. He was the first American soldier to receive the award. In June of 1996, Johnson was posthumously awarded the Purple Heart by President Bill Clinton. In February 2003, the Distinguished Service Cross, the Army's second highest award, was awarded to Johnson. John Howe, a Vietnam veteran who had campaigned tirelessly for recognition for Johnson, and U.S. Army Major General Nathaniel James, president of the 369th Veteran Association, were present at the ceremony in Albany. The award was received by Herman A. Johnson, one of the Tuskegee Airmen of World War II, on behalf of Henry Johnson. It was then believed that Henry was his father. That mistake, though, was clarified after 2015, decades after the younger Johnson's death, as part of a further research done leading up to the senior Johnson's Medal of Honor. On May 14, 2015, the White House announced that Johnson would receive the Medal of Honor posthumously, held on the 2nd of June 2015. Johnson's medal was received on his behalf by Command Sergeant Major Lewis Wilson of the New York National Guard. We're not always good at rewarding our heroes up front and in a timely manner. But like many of the heroes of history, it is up to us to repeat their stories and keep them going. And that's why I'm saying it. William Henry Black Death Johnson was a true 100% badass. Hey, I thank everybody for tuning in for GunsInThe701.com's Badass of the Week. I'm Mike, and of course we do this for you every week, trying to give you somebody from history that just had so much badassery. Now, if you've got somebody to recommend for one of our tales, all you got to do is email us at guns@GunsInThe701.com. That's guns@GunsInThe701.com. Plus, notice that little QR code up there in the corner? Well, that's for you to help us. We got to keep our studios up to date. We've got equipment. There's programs we got to buy. We got to do editing, this and that, and everything else, and keep the lights on. So, with that in mind, if you got a few bucks to spare, anything, drop us a line right up there, hit that QR code, and of course, we'll take anything you want to give us to help us out on this journey. Also, if you'd like to buy some cool GunsInThe701.com merch, along with 701 Nation and more, you can go to GunsInThe701.com and check out our store there. Also, the back catalog of our shows from Wednesday nights, and also the back catalog from Badasses of the Week. That's all I got this week. So until next time, remember what my buddy Clay always says, keep your powder dry and stay safe, you bunch of badasses. Everybody, it's Mike from GunsInThe701.com and our weekly Badass of the Week. Every week we try to go deep into history and find one of those badasses you might have forgotten about but needs to be remembered because they are living up to the title of badass. The unlikely adventures of Zinaida Portnova. Once upon a time, in the bustling city of Leningrad, lived a spirited young girl named Zinaida Portnova. Zinaida, or Zaina, as her friends called her, was just an ordinary teenager with an extraordinary destiny waiting to unfold. In the summer of 1941, Zaina and her younger sister were sent to their grandmother's house in the village of Zwu, near Albol in northern Belarus. Little did they know, their peaceful summer vacation was about to be interrupted by the Nazi invasion into the Soviet Union.
Nobody invites the Nazis, but they always seem to want to come into your place, right?
Jerks. One day, Zaina was helping her grandmother with cattle. A group of Nazi soldiers arrived and they tried to confiscate the family's cattle and in the process hit her grandmother. This incident sparked a fire in Zaina's heart and she decided then and there, no more Miss Nice Zaina. Zaina joined the local underground Komsomol organization in Albol, known as the Young Avengers.
No, it's not a Marvel thing. This is a long time ago, so no copyright infringement. Thank you very much.
Anyway, she began by distributing Soviet propaganda leaflets in German-occupied Belarus, collecting and hiding weapons for Soviet soldiers, and reporting on German troop movements. After learning how to use weapons and explosives from older members of the group, Portnova participated in sabotage actions at pumps, local power plants, and brick factories. These acts were estimated to have killed upwards of 100 German soldiers. It is said as she planted explosives, she couldn't help but whisper,
"Lights out, gentlemen."
But Zaina's most legendary operation was yet to come. Now, she infiltrated a Nazi garrison as a kitchen aide and poisoned the food meant for the soldiers. When the soldiers fell ill, suspicion fell on Zena. Now, to prove her innocence, she ate some of the food herself. She later felt sick, but managed to recover after drinking a lot of whey. Talk about a stomach of steel. Now, after she did not return to work, the Germans realized that she had been the culprit and started searching for her. To avoid the Germans, she became a scout of the partisan unit named after Clement Voroslav. In a letter sent to her parents back in besieged Leningrad that month, she wrote that she is
in a partisan detachment. Together with you, we will beat the Nazi occupiers.
See, this is why I chose her as a badass. In December 1943, Portnova was sent back to Obol to infiltrate another German garrison, discover the reason for the recent Young Avengers failures, then locate and contact the remaining members. But she was quickly captured. Reports of her escape is that during a Gestapo interrogation in the village of Goriani, she took an investigator's pistol off the table, then shot and killed him. When 2 German soldiers entered after hearing the gunshot, she shot them as well. She then attempted to escape the compound and ran into the woods where, unfortunately, she was caught near the banks of the river. After being recaptured, Portnova was tortured, possibly for information, but she gave none. She was later driven into the forest and executed. Despite her capture and tragic end at the age of 17, Zinaida Portnova's spirit lived on. On July 1st, 1958, Portnova was posthumously declared a hero of the Soviet Union. She also received the Order of Lenin in 1969. She also had numerous young pioneer groups named in her honor. And so, the tale of brave Zinaida Portnova, the unlikely hero and the bane of Nazis, continues to inspire generations. And remember, never underestimate the power of a teenager with a cause and a good recipe for poison. Zinaida Portnova, 100% tried and true, a badass. Hey, we thank you guys and gals for tuning in for GunsInThe701.com's and our Badass of the Week. Every week we try to bring you a new badass in history, somebody who just goes above and beyond in the badassery field. But it's not always easy to find. So if you've got somebody in history that is a badass and you'd like us to do a story on them, make sure you give us a buzz. Drop us a line. Send us an email to guns@gunsinthe701.com. That's GUNS at gunsinthe701.com. We'll get your badass story out there and share it on all our social media platforms. And speaking about social media platforms, see that QR code up there? Well, one of the ways we stay on the air, on the internet, and give you new stories every week is by your donations. Now, we can always use a little bit or anything you can spare. That QR code up there will let you donate something right away. And whatever amount you've got, we'll be happy with because it helps us upgrade our equipment, get us studio time, and all the other good stuff. Also, while you're at it, check out all our merch at GunsInThe701.com. We've also got our back catalog of GunsInThe701.com, our weekly Wednesday show. Also, Jamie with 701 Nation and the back catalog for Badass of the Week. That's all at GunsInThe701.com. Well, until next week, we do appreciate, and remember, as my buddy Clay always says, keep your powder dry and stay safe, you bunch of badasses. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to GunsInThe701.com and our Badass of the Week. That's right, every week we go deep into the history of the world and find a badass you might not have known about, but you should, because we should never forget those badasses that came before. Ladies and gentlemen, today we bring you the tale of a true American badass, Daniel Joseph Daly, a man whose courage and valor have become the stuff of legends in the annals of the United States Marine Corps. Born on November 11, 1873 in Glen Cove, New York, Daly was a man of a slight build, standing only 5 foot 6 inches tall and weighing 132 pounds wet. But don't let his size fool you. This man was a force to be reckoned with. Daly enlisted in the United States Marine Corps at the age of 25. His first posting was in the Asiatic Fleet aboard the cruiser USS Newark. In 1900, the fleet arrived in China as part of the Chinese relief expedition during the Boxer Rebellion. Now, Private Daly, along with his commanding officer, Captain Newt H. Hall, set out to reconnoiter a position at the Tartar Wall while under siege by the Boxers. A working party scheduled to follow the construct's defense never arrived. Now, Daly volunteered to hold the position while Captain Hall returned for the working party and single-handedly fought off a furious all-night Boxer attack. For his bravery and valor, Daly earned his first Medal of Honor. On March 14, 1911, Daly was garrisoned at the United States Naval Station in San Juan, Puerto Rico, when he spotted a gasoline fire that was spreading from the forecastle to the merchant schooner Springfield. Now, Daly, with a party of 9 other Marines and sailors, successfully extinguished the fire, though he spent several weeks hospitalized for severe burns. Daly received commendations from both the Secretary of the Navy and the Commandant of the Marine Corps for his actions. At the outbreak of the Battle of Veracruz on April 21, 1914, Sergeant Daly landed in Veracruz, Mexico, with a combined force of 1,200 U.S. Marines and sailors. Now, the American objective was to seize the port and customs house to prevent a shipment of German weapons, 200 machine guns, and 15 million rounds of ammunition, potentially to be used against the United States, from reaching the shore. What? The Mexican government helping out our enemies? Say it isn't so. The ensuing battle saw intense street fighting, and the day after landing, Daly's platoon was pinned down in Arroyo, facing heavy sniper fire from a rooftop. Now, Daly covertly crawled out of a ditch, entered the building from the rear, and killed its entire 7-man garrison. 5 by rifle fire, and 2 by bayonet, up close and personal. By the end of the day, the Americans had captured the city. Daly earned his second Medal of Honor in Haiti, with the U.S. Marines supporting the Haitian government in a fight against the Caicos insurgents. On the night of October 24th, 1915, during the Battle of Fort Dipty, Gunnery Sergeant Daly was on a mounted patrol in the jungle, commanding one of the 3 squadrons detached from the 15th Company 2nd Marine Regiment under the command of Major Smedley Butler. The Marines were ambushed by a force of some 400 Caicos while crossing a river, and the horse carrying their machine gun was killed, its carcass sinking into the riverbed. With the battle raging throughout the night, Daly repeatedly dived into the bottom of the river and into the darkness until he located the horse, freed the machine gun from its restraints, and carried the 200 pounds of weaponry a mile back to the Marines' position. At daybreak, the rearmed Marines regrouped and routed the Caicos, capturing Fort Dipty. Perhaps the most famous moment in Daly's career came during World War I at the Battle of Belleau Woods. It was there that he said to have yelled, pretty much his famous saying, "Come on, you sons of bitches, do you want to live forever?" as he charged into battle against the Germans. At the outbreak of the Battle of Belleau Woods, June 1st, 1918, Daly's regiment was placed in a gap in the line left by the French 43rd Division, with the intent to stop the Germans' advance towards Paris. The Marines drove back an attack by the Germans' 28th Division on June 2nd. On June 5th, a German shell landed in a munitions dump at Lucy-Lubicage, starting a fire. Daly quickly led a party from his company into the flames to extinguish the blaze, preventing the arsenal from exploding. Because that's what Marines do. They run into the fire, not from it. On June 6th, the Marines went on the offensive. The Germans were entrenched in the forest, separated from the Marines by 400 yards of open wheat field, facing 1,200 Germans with 200 machine guns. The 73rd Company was pinned down by intense fire. As the Marines took cover at nightfall, Daly walked openly to each of his machine gun positions, inspiring the men and coordinating their defense. On June 10th, a German machine gun unit advanced close to Daly's position. Daly immediately charged the weapon himself, destroying it with 3 grenades, shot the unit's commanding officer with his .45 caliber pistol, and took its remaining 14 soldiers prisoner. As the battle raged later in the day, Daly exposed himself to enemy fire while evacuating the wounded. For his actions from June 5th through the 10th, Daly was awarded a Navy Cross, the Army's Distinguished Service Cross, and the French Médaille Militaire. Daly later fought in the Battle of Saint-Mihiel and the Battle of Blancmont Ridge. His final campaign was the Meuse-Argonne Offensive. By the war's end, he had suffered a bullet wound in the shoulder, 2 shrapnel wounds in the leg, and after serving in the American occupation forces in Germany, Daly left active duty for the United States Marine Corps Reserve in 1919 and officially retired on February 6, 1929 at the rank of Sergeant Major. Daly's legacy lives on in the Marine Corps and in the hearts of all those who value courage and honor. His medals of honor are on display at the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Triangle, Virginia. As we remember Daniel Daly, let us strive to embody the values that he stood for: courage, honor, and an unwavering commitment to duty. For in the words of General John A. Lejeune, Daly was the outstanding Marine of all time. Daly's early life was humble. He was born to Irish immigrants and worked as a newsboy before enlisting in the Marine Corps. His decision to enlist was driven by a desire to see the world and serve his country. After the war, Daly returned to the United States and continued to serve in the Marine Corps until his retirement in 1929. Even in retirement, Daly remained a staunch advocate for the Marine Corps and often spoke at public events about his experiences. Daniel Daly passed away on April 27, 1937, but his spirit, his courage, and his dedication to duty live on. The life and adventures of Daniel Daly are a testament to the courage, honor, and commitment that defines the United States Marine Corps. His story serves as an inspiration to all those who hear it, and a reminder of the sacrifices made by those who serve our country. Daniel Joseph Daly, a true American badass. We thank everybody for joining us for GunsInThe701.com and our Badass of the Week. Every week we try to go into history and find some badass out there you need to know about. And to do so, well, we need your suggestions. You can always drop us a line at our emails at guns@GunsInThe701.com. That's guns@GunsInThe701.com. You see that big QR code up there in the corner? Yep, that's how you help us out if you can. You can click on that and make a donation. Any amount will be great. We need to keep our equipment up to date. Also, nowadays programs are all on subscription basis, so we always have to update those as well, make payments here and there, and it's just an ongoing thing. It's always, like I need to tell you, there's always a bill for something, right? Also, don't forget to go to GunsInThe701.com. You can check out our merch that we have on the store as well. And also, while you're there, you can check out the back catalog for GunsInThe701.com, our weekly Wednesday show on all our platforms. Also, you can check out 701 Nation. Jamie's show is on the back catalog there as well. And our back catalog for Badass of the Week. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. And remember, as my buddy Clay always says, keep your powder dry. And stay safe, you bunch of badasses. Welcome back to GunsInThe701.com and our Badass of the Week. Every week we bring you a badass from history. Someone that needs to be remembered because of their badassery. Today we travel, to Once Upon a Time land in the small village of Salem, Massachusetts, where lived a man named Giles Corey, born in Northampton, England in 1611. Giles was a prosperous farmer, known for his hard work and determination. Giles was a man of many facets. He was known for his strength, both physical and mental, but also for his stubbornness. He had been married 3 times, with each wife bringing a different kind of joy and challenges to his life. His 3rd wife, Martha, was a woman of strong character, much like Giles himself. One day, Giles' wife, Martha, came home to find him talking to their ox.
Right, Giles, why on earth are you talking to an ox?
She asked, puzzled. Giles turned to her with a grin and replied,
Well, Martha, I've been trying to teach him how to plow the fields, but he's a bit stubborn. I thought I'd have a heart-to-heart with him and it might help.
Martha couldn't help but laugh at her husband's antics. Giles had a way of turning even the most mundane tasks into a source of amusement. In 1692, the peaceful life of Salem was disrupted by the infamous Salem witch trials. Accusations of witchcraft spread like wildfire, creating an atmosphere of fear and suspicion. Giles and Martha were among the first to attend the pre-trial examinations. However, as the trials progressed, Martha began to doubt their validity. Her skepticism did not go unnoticed. By mid-March, rumors had begun to swirl that Martha herself was a witch. Giles, caught up in the hysteria, believed the accusations against his wife and even testified against her. He spoke of the strange occurrences around their home, such as the sudden illness of his ox and a pet cat. However, the tables were soon turned. On April 18th, 1692, Giles himself was accused of practicing witchcraft. He was arrested and brought in for examination. It was then that Giles made a decision that would mark his place in history. When Giles was brought in for questioning, he turned the situation into a farce.
Witchcraft? Me?
He would exclaim, feigning shock.
Why, the only spell I know is how to make my crops grow. Unless you count the one where I turn water into, well, cider.
The court officials were not amused, but the crowd was. And Giles remained undeterred. When asked to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty, Giles simply shrugged and said,
Can I plead hungry? It's almost lunchtime, and I can smell Martha's pie from here.
Despite the grim circumstances, Giles' humor was infectious. Even in the face of torture, he managed to keep his spirits high. Unlike others who were accused, Giles refused to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. This act of defiance was met with a brutal form of torture known as pressing. For 3 days, Giles was subjected to this torture, where heavy stones were placed on his body in an attempt to force him to plead. After the first day, he was recorded saying,
You know, I've always wanted to try stone therapy. I hear it's great for the back.
And Giles Corey was not a man to be broken easily. Despite the unbearable pain, he refused to plead, uttering only 2 words on his last day of life.
More weight!
His resilience was both shocking and inspiring. On September 19, 1692, Giles Corey passed away, but his spirit of defiance lives on. His refusal to enter a plea had significant impact. According to the laws of the time, because Giles did not enter a plea, his estate was passed on to his sons instead of being seized by the local government. Probably the main reason why they were doing it anyway. The story of Giles Corey serves as a stark reminder of the power of the individual will and the dangers of mass hysteria. His tale is one of courage, defiance, and unyielding spirit in the face of injustice. Even today, the name Giles Corey echoes through the annals of history, a symbol of resistance in the face of unfounded accusations and unfair trials. And that's why Giles Moreweight Corey is truly 100% a badass. The sources for this story were Wikipedia.org, HistoryOfMassachusetts.org, TheHistoryJunkie.com, Ancestors.FamilySearch.org, and more. We hope you like this badass of the week, and if you want to hear more on GunsInThe701.com, all you got to do is let us know what badass you got in mind for us to talk about. Drop us a line at guns@GunsInThe701.com. That's guns@GunsInThe701.com. You can also go to our website, check out back catalog for our Guns in the 701 Wednesday show. Also, our 701 Nation with Jamie and our back catalog for Badass of the Week. See that QR code up there? Hold on a second. Let me get it up. Bing! There we go. Hey, you can check that thing out as well and donate some money if you got a little to spare. Help us out because studios aren't cheap and we got to keep everything updated. And nowadays, they got you over a barrel because they make you buy subscriptions to programs instead of buying the programs outright. So you're always end up paying for something. So a little money or whatever you want to spare, right up there at the QR code is what you can do. You can also head over and check out the merch on our website at gunsinthe701.com. Right here is a good spot where I would put a little tidbit about your business if you were our sponsor. So if you'd like to be sponsor of gunsinthe701.com's Badass of the Week, drop us a line at gunsinthe701.com. Until next week, when we have more badassery for you, I'm Mike, and as my buddy Clay always says, keep your powder dry and stay safe, you bunch of badasses. Located at 309 South Washington Street in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Give them a call at 701-258-6308.
The team of mechanics at Lauer Auto can take care of any problem your vehicle is having. And when you do business with Lauer, you can be assured you're doing business with a pro Second Amendment America First repair shop. There are plenty of other auto repair shops in the Bismarck-Mandan area. But why take a chance at patronizing a shop that might not have your beliefs at heart? Make no mistake. Lauer Auto is your pro Second Amendment repair shop. When you talk to the guys at Lauer Auto, don't forget to tell them that you heard they are a sponsor of Guns and the 701 and that you appreciate their support of our pro Second Amendment, pro North Dakota live stream and podcast. That's Lauer Auto Repair, 701-258-6308.
701-258-6308.
Located 309 South Washington Street in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Experience the exhilaration of power in your hands at Bloodline Kinetics. Why Cerakote? Simply, it aids in firearm preservation while also giving your piece a unique look. Barrel threading, NFA laser engraving, bolt handle threading, mount, level, and bore, sight scope chamber rebarreling, and much more. Bloodline Kinetics is meant to reflect a long American lineage in gun ownership, who stand for the Second Amendment rights, Bloodline, and the science behind gun accuracy. Kinetics. To some, it's just a constitutional right that can go away. To us, it's in our American bloodline, and we believe it should stay that way. Here at Bloodline Kinetics, we understand that hunters, sportsmen, women, and gun owners should have a quality firearm. Stop and see us at 2008 Morrison Avenue 2 in Bismarck, North Dakota, 58504, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Call 701-390-7997. Visit our website, bloodlinekinetics.com.
Anvil Brand LLC, raising and training tomorrow's barrel horses right out of Bismarck, North Dakota. Tracy and her family are great American patriots who not only support the Second Amendment, but they also promoted what you're looking for, top quality barrel horses. Go ahead and give Tracy a call at 701-471-6629 and tell them Guns and the 701.com sent you. That's Anvil Brand LLC out of Bismarck, North Dakota.
Like Michael, the flow like Aubrey. Walk around thinking I'm a prince like Saudi. Mismatched Converse, t-shirts tucked in. Know my worth, can't tell me nothing. White Nikes, albino, can cop my stilo. Head to the top, bottom line is a motto.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Guns and the 701's Badass of the Week. That's right, every week we try to go deep into history and find some badass out there that you need to know about, never forget about, and always have in the back of your mind as, my gosh, that person was a badass. On this episode of Badass of the Week, we're talking about Francis.
Nobody calls me Francis.
We're talking about Francis Pegamagabo. Now, Francis Pegamagabo was born on March 9th, 1891 in Shenawalga First Nation, Ontario, Canada. As an Ojibwe, he grew up immersed in traditions and teachings of his people. But orphaned at a young age, he was raised by his extended family who taught him the skills of hunting, tracking, and survival in the wilderness. These early experiences would later prove to really help him in his badassery. Just a week or so after the British declared war on Germany in World War I, Francis enlisted in 1914, and Pegamagabo felt a strong sense of duty and enlisted in the Canadian Expeditionary Forces. Now, he joined the 1st Battalion Canadian Expeditionary Force and quickly became known for his exceptional marksmanship and scouting abilities. His skills were put to the test in the trenches of Europe, a new type of war that no one had ever seen before. A modern warfare. One of Pegamagabo's first major engagements was the Second Battle of Ypres in 1915. Now, this battle was notorious for the first large-scale use of poison gas, that's right, mustard gas and more, by the German forces. And now, amidst the chaos and deadly gas attacks, Pegamagabo, his bravery and quick thinking, saved so many lives. Now, he scouted enemy positions, relaying crucial information and provided covering fire for his comrades who were negotiating a new hell in warfare. By 1916, at the Battle of Somme, that was another significant chapter in Pegamagabo's military career. He was marked by brutal trench warfare and massive casualties. Pegamagabo's role as a sniper and a scout was critical. He often volunteered for dangerous reconnaissance missions, crawling through no man's land to gather intelligence on enemy movements. His accuracy as a sniper made him a formidable opponent, and he was credited with numerous enemy kills. But that wasn't all. At night, Pegamagabo would sneak into German trenches and remove parts of sleeping soldiers' uniforms. Now, he'd do this following the warrior tradition of counting coup, which involves intimidating an enemy and persuading them to admit defeat without having to kill them. Hence where he got the name The Ghost in the Trenches.
By the way, that's a great book if you ever want to pick that one up. Why it's not a movie, I don't know.
Now, throughout his service, Pegamagabo was awarded the military medals 3 times for his bravery and dedication. These decorations made him one of the most decorated Indigenous soldiers in Canadian history. His courage and resilience in the face of adversity was truly remarkable. Now, Pegamagabo, using the much maligned Ross rifle, is what he racked up a total of 378 German kills and capturing more than 300 more during the war. Now, the Ross rifle was much better for sniper use than it was for the average soldier. A sniper could more easily afford to have their rifle sized up because of the mud and the soldiers trying to repel a trench raid, and they could take better advantage of the speed of a straight pull bolt for follow-up shots. But Pegamagabo loved his Ross rifle. After the war, Pegamagabo returned to Canada, but the transition to civilian life was challenging. He faced discrimination and struggled to find employment, and despite the difficulties, he remained committed to his people and their rights. He became an advocate for Indigenous veterans and worked tirelessly to improve the conditions of his community. Pegamagabo served as chief of the Perry Island Band and later as a counselor. He fought for the rights of Indigenous people, including the better access to education, healthcare, and land rights. His leadership and advocacy were instrumental in advancing the cause of Indigenous veterans and their communities. Francis Pegamagabo. His life and adventures reflect the strength and spirit of the Ojibwe people. His bravery on the battlefield and his commitment to his community continue to inspire and resonate with many today. His story is a powerful reminder of the contributions of Indigenous soldiers and the importance of recognizing their sacrifices and achievements. And if I didn't already say it, my God, that man was a badass. Sources for this badass of the week were, of course, Wikipedia, because what would I do without it? WarHistoryOnline.com, the Canadian Encyclopedia.ca, WarHistoryOnline.com, the Great War YouTube page, and CBC.ca. Well, that concludes this week's Badass of the Week on GunsInThe701.com. As always, if you've got a badass in history you want us to talk about, do a little show on, we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a line. We take critiques, we take compliments, and we even take money. That's right. See that QR code up at the corner? You can click on that and donate a little cash. If you got it, we could use it to keep our equipment up to snuff and, get all our bills paid. To write me directly, you can go to Mike at GunsInThe701.com. That's Mike at GunsInThe701.com. Remember, for a back catalog, you can always go to our website, GunsInThe701.com. We've got Guns in the 701's weekly show on Wednesday there. We've also got our friend Jamie and the 701 Nation show there as well with the back catalog and our Badass of the Week. Well, that'll about do it for today. Until next time, for Badass of the Week, I'm Mike. And remember, as my friend Clay always says, keep your powder dry and stay safe, you bunch of badasses. Well, everybody, welcome back to GunsInThe701.com and our weekly Badass of the Week. Every week, we make sure that history is remembered by pulling one of those lost stories out of history about someone's badassery so we can continue the oral tradition. This week on our Badass of the Week, we got the adventures of a little guy named Peter Fruchen. Once upon a time in the icy realms of Greenland, there lived a man named Peter Fruchen, standing a towering 6 foot 7 inches tall, with a beard that could rival a polar bear's fur. Peter was no ordinary explorer. He was a Danish Arctic explorer, anthropologist, author, and even a bit of a Hollywood star. But his life was anything but ordinary. Now, Peter's adventures began when he joined an expedition to Greenland in early 1900s. He quickly fell in love with the harsh, frozen landscape and the Inuit people, who called it home. He learned their language, adopted their customs, and even married an Inuit woman named Navarna. Together, they braved the Arctic's unforgiving climate, hunting seals, building igloos, writing your name in the snow. Typical things. One winter, in the Arctic tundra, a vast expanse of white, where the wind howled like a pack of wolves and the temperature was so cold it could freeze the whiskers off a walrus. In the midst of the frozen wilderness, Peter Fruchen, the Danish explorer, with a beard as wild as his adventures, found himself in a bit of a pickle. Peter had been out on an expedition, documenting the habits of polar bears, or some such noble pursuit, when a sudden blizzard hit. Seeking shelter, he stumbled upon an ice cave. It looked like a good idea at the time, a cozy little nook to wait out the storm. But as the snow piled up outside, Peter realized he was trapped. The entrance was completely blocked by a wall of ice and snow. Now, most people would panic in a situation like this, but not Peter. He was a man of action, a man who had once wrestled a walrus just to see if he could. So he did what any sensible person would do. He took stock of his supplies. Unfortunately, all he had was a bit of seal meat, a flask of whiskey, and his trusty knife. Not exactly the survivalist dream kit. Days upon days passed, and Peter's situation grew more dire. The cave was getting colder. His food supplies were dwindling, but Peter, ever the optimist, decided to make the best of it. He built a little snowman, for company, and named it Olaf.
Is there a Disney copyright thing here? I think I've heard this story in some aspect before. Just let it go, I guess. Anyway.
He even gave Olaf a backstory, a tragic tale of lost love and adventures on the high seas. It was all very dramatic. One particularly frigid night, as Peter huddled in his fur coat, an idea struck him. It was a crazy idea, but desperate times call for desperate measures. He remembered a trick that he had learned from the Inuit, the art of making a chisel from frozen feces. Yeah, I said that right. Yeah. Peter, with a twinkle in his eye and a grimace on his face, set about his task, making a poop chisel. That's right. After a few days of careful crafting, Peter had his chisel. It wasn't pretty, and it certainly didn't smell great, but it was his ticket to freedom. He began chipping away at the ice, slowly but surely making progress. All the while, he kept up the running commentary for Olaf's benefit, complete with dramatic pauses and exaggerated gestures. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Peter broke through the last layer of ice. He emerged from the cave, blinking in the bright Arctic sunlight, looking like a wild man who had just escaped from a particularly chilly version of Alcatraz. He took a deep breath of fresh, cold air and let out a triumphant roar. That's the best roar I could do. Sorry. Now, Peter made his way back to camp, where his fellow explorers greeted him with a mix of astonishment and amusement. When they asked him how he'd managed to escape, Peter simply grinned and said, "Let's just say that it was a crappy situation, but I made the best of it." So Peter Fruchen added another incredible tale to his repertoire, one that would be told and retold around campfires for years to come. His escape from the ice cave was a testament to his ingenuity, his indomitable spirit, and his ability to find humor even in the most dire of circumstances. Now, later in the midst of World War II, Peter Fruchen, the towering Danish explorer with a heart as big as his stature, found himself in a dire predicament. Captured by the Gestapo for his involvement in the Danish resistance, Peter was thrown into a German prison. But if the Nazis thought they could contain this Arctic adventurer, they were sorely mistaken. Peter's cell was a cold, damp room with a single barred window that offered a view of the bleak gray courtyard. The guards, thinking they had captured just another resistance fighter, had no idea that they were dealing with a man who had once escaped an ice cave using a chisel made from his own frozen feces. Peter, however, knew that brute strength alone would not get him out of this one. He needed a plan and a bit of his trademark humor to keep his spirits high. One evening, as the guards were making their rounds, Peter noticed that one of them had a particular habit of whistling a jaunty tune. Peter, ever the keen observer, realized that the guard's routine was as predictable as the Arctic tides. He began to hatch a plan that was as audacious as it was ingenious. Peter started by befriending the guard, engaging him in conversation about music, and even teaching him a few Danish folk songs. The guard, flattered by the attention and the novelty of learning a new language, began to let his guard down. Now Peter, booming with laughter and infectious personality at all times, made him a favorite among the prison staff, who started to see him less as a prisoner and more of an eccentric uncle. One night, Peter put his plan into action. He had fashioned a makeshift key from a piece of... No, you thought I was going to say poop, didn't you? No, metal that he found in the prison courtyard. Timing his move perfectly with the guard's whistling routine, Peter managed to unlock his cell and slip out into the corridor. But instead of making a mad dash for freedom, he did something unexpected. He walked straight into the guard's room and sat down at his desk. When the guard returned, he was startled to find Peter sitting there, casually reading a book.
"What are you doing here?"
the guard exclaimed. Peter, without missing a beat, replied, "I got bored in my cell and thought I'd come for a chat. You know, it's quite lonely in there." The guard, bewildered but amused, couldn't help but laugh. Peter's audacity and charm had disarmed him completely. Literally. Taking advantage of the guard's momentary distraction, Peter swiftly knocked him out with a well-placed punch to the head. He then donned the guard's uniform, complete with a hat that was slightly too small for his enormous head. He strolled out of the prison as if he owned the place. Now, as he walked through the gates, Peter couldn't resist one last act of defiance. Now, he turned to the remaining guards, who were too busy playing cards to notice anything amiss, and shouted in perfect German,
"I'll be back for my things later."
The guards, thinking it was just another one of the jokes that the guards made, waved him off in a chuckle. Now, Peter made his way back to the Danish resistance, where his escape became the stuff of legends. His friends couldn't believe the audacity of his plan, and Peter, with a twinkle in his eye, simply said,
"Sometimes all you need is a bit of charm and a lot of luck.
Peter's life was a series of incredible adventures, each more unbelievable than the last. He wrote numerous books about his experiences, sharing his love of the Arctic and its people with the world. He even made a brief foray into Hollywood, where he won an Academy Award for Best Original Story for a film named Eskimo. Now, despite his larger-than-life persona, Peter remained humble and deeply connected to the natural world. He often said that the Arctic had taught him the true meaning of resilience and the importance of laughter in the face of adversity. So the next time you find yourself in a tough spot, remember the story of Peter Fruchin. Whether you're trapped in an ice cave or facing an insurmountable challenge, a little ingenuity and a good sense of humor can go a long way. And who knows, you might just carve your way to freedom with a smile on your face and a poop chisel in your hand. Peter Fruchin, a Danish 6'7" total badass. Sources for this story were wikipedia.org, allthat'sinteresting.com, books.google.com, and historydefined.net. Hey, if you liked our Badass of the Week from GunsInThe701.com, don't forget you can check out our back catalog of stories of other badasses. We've got that for you at GunsInThe701.com. On our back catalog, you can also check out our Wednesday show for GunsInThe701.com. We got the back catalog there as well. And our buddy Jamie's got 701 Nation. Our sister show is there as well with the back catalog. As always, if you've got a badass that you want us to talk about, well, I'd love to hear from you. All you got to do is drop us a line, and you can do that at Mike@GunsInThe701.com. That's Mike@GunsInThe701.com. See that QR code up there? Well, you can click on that and donate a little cash. A couple of dollars, a fin, a 10 spot, a 20, whatever you got that you can spare, we'd love to have it. We need to keep up our equipment. We've got recording time we've got to do. We've also got subscriptions that we've got to update because that's the way of the world nowadays. All the computer programs are subscription-based. So it always helps us out to have a little cash on hand. Also, don't forget to check out GunsInThe701.com. We've got our store on there where you can get merch. We've got all kinds of merch coming in left and right. Also, you can check out what we've got going on our upcoming shows. And I'll tell you what, it's just nice to see you on there. Well, until next week when we get another badass in history to talk about, right here on GunsInThe701.com, don't forget, as my friend Clay always says, keep your powder dry and stay safe, you bunch of badasses.
The man who loves walking will get further than the man who only seeks the destination. Embrace the suck and carry on. The difficulty of the challenge determines the quality of the man who comes out the other side.
The future has not been written. There is no fate but what we make for ourselves.
With our fingernails to that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's gonna make the fucking difference between winning and losing.
Hey everybody, welcome to GunsInThe701.com and our weekly Badass of the Week. Every week, time permitting, we try to get you a story of some badass of history that you might not have known of. And we don't want any of the badassery of history to be left in the dustbins of time. So this week, we're going to talk about one that you might know about. If you don't, well, now you do. Desmond Doss, the hero without a gun. Now, Desmond Doss was born February 7th, 1919 in Lynchburg, Virginia. Raised as a devout Seventh-day Adventist, he adhered strictly to the commandments, "Thou shalt not kill," which shaped his pacifist beliefs. Now, despite his strong convictions, Doss felt a patriotic duty to serve his country during World War II. And when war did break out, he enlisted in the Army, but as a conscientious observer. Now, Doss chose military service despite being offered deferment because of working in the shipyards during the war in Newport News, Virginia. Now, he was sent to Fort Jackson in South Carolina for training with the reactivation of the 77th Infantry Division. Meanwhile, his brother, Harold, served on the USS Lindsay.
Not to be
confused with the USS Lindsey Graham, which is also filled with seamen. Now, Doss, of course, being an Adventist, refused to carry a weapon into combat because of his personal beliefs. Now, assigned as a combat medic, he was put in the 2nd Platoon, Company B, 1st Battalion, 307th Infantry, 77th Infantry Division. Now, Doss faced significant challenges during his training. His refusal to carry a weapon or work on the Sabbath led to ridicule, harassment from his fellow soldiers. They saw him as a liability and questioned his bravery. However, Doss remained steadfast in his beliefs, earning their respect through his unwavering dedication and resilience. Now, we talked about the ridicule and harassment, physical abuse from some of his comrades, isolation, military discipline, also combat conditions. As a medic, Doss faced the same dangers as any combat soldier without any means to defend himself, and injury and pain, which we'll get to later. Now, while serving in his platoon in 1944 in Guam and the Philippines, his true heroism came during the Battle of Okinawa in 1945, one of the bloodiest battles of the Pacific War. The American forces were tasked with capturing the Medea encampment, known as Hacksaw Ridge.
Want to check out that movie? It's fantastic. Still to this day.
Now, the ridge was heavily fortified by Japanese troops, making it a deadly mission. Not to mention that the Japanese troops had also brought in, children from the island to serve as saboteurs and soldiers as well. Now, on May 5th, 1945, Doss's unit was ordered to retreat after a brutal assault. However, Doss stayed behind. Hearing the cries of wounded soldiers, over the next 12 hours, he braved enemy fire, carrying injured men to the edge of the ridge and lowering them to safety using a rope sling. Now, despite the constant threat of death, Doss saved 75 men that day, earning him the Medal of Honor. But Doss's bravery didn't end there. Throughout the battle, he continued to risk his life to save others, even after being wounded by a grenade and later by sniper fire. His actions were a testament to his courage, faith, and commitment to his fellow soldiers. Now, we talk about his wounds. He suffered a left arm fracture from a sniper bullet while being carried back to Allied lines, and at one point had 17 pieces of shrapnel embedded in his body after attempting to kick a grenade away from himself and his comrades. After the war, Doss continued his career in carpentry, but extensive damage to his left arm made that impossible. In 1946, he was diagnosed with tuberculosis, contracted on one of the isles that he served on, while undergoing treatment for 5.5 years, losing a lung and 5 ribs, before being discharged from the hospital in 1951 with 90% disability. Now, after an overdose of antibiotics rendered him completely deaf in 1976, he was given 100% disability, and he was able to regain his hearing after receiving a cochlear implant in 1988. Despite his injuries, he managed to raise a family on a small farm in Rising Fawn, Georgia. Desmond Doss's story is a powerful reminder of the impact one person can have, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. His legacy lives on as a symbol of selflessness, bravery, and the power of conviction. Desmond Doss faced numerous challenges during his time in the Army, both due to his pacifist beliefs and the harsh realities of war. Despite these challenges, Doss's unwavering faith and determination allowed him to overcome adversity and perform acts of extraordinary heroism. His story is a testament of the power of conviction and the impact of selfless service. Something I think we need to teach more and more of. Selfless service, even if you don't pick up a gun. There are so many duties that can be performed by good citizens. Desmond Doss died on March 23, 2006 at his home in Piedmont, Alabama. Buried in April 3, 2006 in the Chattahooga National Cemetery in Tennessee. And we'll call it truly one of America's most astonishing badasses. Sources for this tale were History.com, Marines.mil, IMDb.com, also Wikipedia, and USWarMemorials.org. Thanks for tuning in for GunsInThe701.com and our Badass of the Week. Every single week we try to come up with a badass in history that needs to be remembered. This one was a good one. And if you got somebody you want to hear about, a guy or gal, somebody in history that needs to be remembered, you can always drop us a line, Mike@GunsInThe701.com. That's Mike@GunsInThe701.com. I'll see about doing a story for it, and I'll definitely let you know if we're going to. Of course, Mike@GunsInThe701.com. And that's it for this time. So, hey, as my friend Clay always says, keep your powder dry and stay safe, you bunch of badasses.
Caution! The following program depicts images and stories of badassery. From the dawn of human existence, there have been men and women of extraordinary strength, bravery, and fortitude.
So I'll just say this as simple as I can. If it's our time to die, it's our time. All I ask is, if we have to give these bastards our lives, we give them hell before we do!
These everyday people looked death in the face and said, "Not today." These stories are sometimes lost to time, but the spoken word is here to bring their tales to life.
Are you ready for tales that will shatter your spine and boil your blood?
Well, duh.
These men and women clawed, bit, punched, kicked, stabbed, shot, and whatever else it took to survive against all odds.
Baby, I would fight the Kids Army for you.
Badass Mofos is a product of GAT 701, a division of GunsInThe701.com and 701 Nation, where we pull a name from history and tell their tale of true badassery. Our story starts in the cold, unforgiving wilderness of Finland. A young boy named Simo Heija was born on December 17th, 1905, growing up in the farm of the Rajat-Jarvi province. Simo learned the values of hard work, patience, and resilience. He spent his youth hunting and skiing, honing the skills that would make him a formidable marksman. At the age of 17, Simo, he joined the Finnish Civil Guard, where his talents for shooting quickly became evident. He won numerous marksmanship competitions, filling his home with trophies. But during the Winter War of 1939 to 1940, Simo's name would become synonymous with fear and death for the Soviet soldiers. When the Soviets invaded Finland, Simo, he took up his rifle and headed to the front lines. One of the most remarkable aspects of Heija's story is his ability to operate in extreme conditions. The Winter War was fought in harsh winter weather, with temperatures often dropping below 40 degrees Celsius. Heija wore white camouflage to blend in with the snowy environment, earning him the nickname the White Death. He'd earned that name, that's for damn sure. Simo preferred using the iron-sighted M2830 Nagant rifle over a scoped one, as scopes could reflect sunlight and give away his position. Now, what makes Simo that much better than anyone else? In the course of 100 days during the battles, Simo racked up over 500 confirmed kills, earning him that nickname, the White Death. His personal best was 40 kills in a single day. He used an innovative tactic, such as building snowbanks around his position for concealment and putting snow in his mouth to hide his breath. Despite the overwhelming odds, Simo's determination and his skill made him a legend. His exploits struck fear in the hearts of the Soviet soldiers, who even launched counter-sniper missions specifically to eliminate him. Despite his incredible success, Heija was not invincible. In 1940, he was severely wounded by an explosive sodium bullet that hit his lower jaw. Now, he was left in a coma for several days, but eventually recovered. The war shortly ended after his injuries had healed, and Finland managed to retain its independence, though it had to cede some of its territory to the Soviet Union. After the war, Simo recovered from his injuries and lived a long life, passing away at the age of 96 in 2002. His legacy as the deadliest sniper in history remains unmatched, and his story continues to inspire all those who would hear it. Camouflage and concealment, positioning, patience and stealth, iron sights, minimal equipment, psychological warfare, adaptability. Simo Häyhä's sniping skills were instrumental in slowing down the Soviet advance, and his actions during the battle contributed significantly to his reputation. After healing enough from his wounds and the war being over, Simo did what he always does. He went hunting for moose and would guide hunts for many years. Simo Häyhä, Finnish legend, the White Death. Truly 100% a badass mofo. Thanks to listening to Badass Mofo's Tales of the Toughest, a GunsInThe701.com production. Every few weeks, we'll have a new story of another badass mofo out there, and we hope that you tune in to find out about them. Because the best way to keep history alive is to keep talking about it. If you got an idea for a badass mofo, well, we'd like to hear from you. Drop us a line at Mike@GunsInThe701.com. That's Mike@GunsInThe701.com. See the QR code? That little bad boy is what you can do to maybe donate a little cash if you can. It's not easy keeping up with all the equipment needs, and of course, studio time is always a must. So we would appreciate if you can drop a few bucks here and there. And don't forget, you can also go to GunsInThe701.com, check out our merch and more. Until next time, when we do another story on a badass mofo, Tales of the Toughest. Remember, as my friend Clay always says, keep your powder dry and stay safe, you bunch of badasses.